Welcome to the Marshall Pruett podcast and our Week in Sports Cars episode. Graham, Goodwin. It's getting close to bedtime this Tuesday evening in the UK. How are you, my friend?
I'd say fair to fabulous, really. It's the closing hours before I hop onto a plane to somewhere sunny for a week with the lovely Mrs. Goodwin, the lovely Mrs. DSC editor, in fact. And I'm looking forward to a little bit of time away from the coalface. Won't stop working, never do, but certainly not quite as intense as it's been through what's already been a long season, and just before we start getting into what's a rather truncated period of long-haul flyaways for the WEC and the Asian Le Mans Series.
And knowing that you're going to be on vacation next week, we have an intent to do the Week in Sports Cars together, but if by chance technology stands in your way, I know you've been working on a potential 1 week stand-in.
I'm hoping to reveal the name. It's a big name. I mean, when I say big, I mean big. I don't mean like long, big name. But I'm not going to say quite yet because
Scott
it's
Tucker.
just.
You've got Scott Tucker. No,
that's quite difficult through that kind of thickness of glass.
Greg Lowell, maybe. Greg Lowell.
No. That's even worse. The key to this is, can Cyprus's top internet engineers help me to actually link with the west coast of the United States? If they can, we're good to go. If not, then you might get the guest presenter. It's going to keep people on tenterhooks, I know. They'll all be guessing for the remainder of this week. The Week in Sports Cars next week might be very different.
Very. Well, I am headed down to Monterey here in less than 2 days for at least a day or two of Ren Sport reunion coverage, so I'm looking forward to that. Plan on being down there Thursday and Friday. Had previously planned on being down through Sunday, but I've had a couple of other things take much greater priority, so I think it'll be 2 days down there on behalf of Racer Magazine, Racer.com, and I'm hesitant to announce it now, so I won't. But there is something potentially very special that will be taking place there that I have cooked up with a friend of ours who is a Porsche factory pilot, and it's doing some laps in a car that I don't believe has turned laps since 1990. So we'll see if all that works out, and I'd be lying if I said it would fall so much in the Week in Sports Cars domain. Might be a little bit more in the Week in IndyCar domain. So, yeah, anyways, hoping all that happens. Hoping that I have both footage and audio and all pictures to show. But, yeah, can't wait to get down for Ren Sport Reunion. It is the best thing in the world. I've never driven a Porsche, which is still one of the funniest things. I can't tell you how many days, years of my life I've spent either loving, covering, competing against, you name it, Porsche. I've never actually driven one of their machines, but hey, heading down to give them love at the reunion's an easy one for me.
Well, it's a bizarre one. I have driven a few Porsches, but the very first Porsche I ever drove was diesel, and they've just announced that they're ceasing production in diesels. So it was supremely comfortable, by the way, a very, very good car indeed. But it was, I'm afraid, a diesel. I can just hear all the Porsche fanatics actually tearing out the remaining hair that they may well still have at that news. But since then, I have driven some rather more traditionally wonderful Porsche machinery, but it was, I'm afraid, one of Dr. Rudolph's evil twins that was my first experience. So then,
yeah, I guess we have to kill that story we were ready to file on the new Porsche diesel LMP1 program for next year.
Yeah, so that's gone.
Definitely sad about that.
Well, I come to you this week, MP, from what was an incredibly soggy Spa-Francorchamps for the European Le Mans Series penultimate round, where we had an astonishing array of happenings, one of which was common sense from a race organiser on the news of an incoming storm front, which absolutely would have meant that we got a complete washout for the 4-hour race. They decided to bring forward the race by almost 2 hours. We got, therefore, around 2 hours of track time, half the race gone. And what we saw in that half the race was that because only half points were awarded, effectively that's put the nail in the title. It means that G-Drive Racing become another team that will go to the Le Mans 24 Hours. We have the irony, therefore, that G-Drive Racing know now that they're going to be racing at the Le Mans 24 Hours in 2019 before they know whether or not they finish the race in 2018. Because obviously we're waiting at some point in the coming week for a decision from the FI Court of Appeal on finally the race result for the Le Mans 24 Hours in LMP2 after the controversy of the changes that were made by TDS Racing, who ran the 26 car, that finished first on the road, but was then excluded for adding in an additional component to effectively defeat the fuel fill restrictor. So all sorts of bizarreness, including a rather nasty incident involving Jean-Eric Verne, who rather clumsily managed to eliminate 2 other cars from the race. And had we gone to full distance, then that car would not have been confirmed as the championship winner. As it turned out, the ability to earn full points being withdrawn from their competitors, it is the 26 car, and Roman Rusinov and Andrea Pizzitola who come out as being the European Le Mans Series champions. Verne missing out, by the way, because he was on Formula E duty for the first round. So that was my weekend, which was great fun, if a little soggy.
And minus that sogginess, now that you have been able to dry out a bit, should we jump right into questions? I mean, granted, you just mentioned essentially a massive amount of news just coming out of the weekend you were in, but should we get into questions and keep driving the conversation forward? Thanks to our friends, both across the trio of awesomeness that is Reddit, Twitter, and Facebook.
Absolutely, and another bumper bundle, dozens and dozens of high-quality questions, and more, by the way, coming in because it's been a busy day of news around the Twitter sphere and the internet and beyond, with some news pertinent to IMSA and LMP2. I'm sure we'll come on to cover that one later. LMP3, beginning to unwrap the way that the new cars in 2020 will happen there, and further movement with LMP1 and Hypercar and all things there. But for me, I mean, the opening kind of gambit was actually a car we saw for the first time, MP, as we arrived at the Spa-Francorchamps circuit early on Saturday morning. And it was a white, looked a little bit kind of Super GT type, small prototype, turned out to be based on an LMP3 and a DES chassis, quite a rare beast.
They're popping up in strange places.
They are indeed, and this one is a very strange one because this is a hydrogen electric powered car, the H24 program, out of the Green GT operation that initially was slated to put together a Garage 56 car for the Le Mans 24 Hours some few years ago. That didn't happen. I'm afraid we've had a couple of them fall short on budgetary terms, but it appears now that the ACO, the Automobile Club de l'Ouest, the organisers of the Le Mans 24 Hours, have invested in that program and are going to use that technology program as effectively as a tech demonstrator to move forward. We know already that the new grandstand and pits complex that will be in place for 2023, 2024, that has been designed to have the ability to have a hydrogen and alternative fuels network built into it. So the infrastructure will be there to fulfill the needs of anybody that wants to go with a zero emissions car. Because this is the extraordinary thing about these cars, of course, is that what is produced as effectively exhaust fume, the only byproduct, if you like, from that is water. So interesting stuff. Not a lot to really say yet about that program. It's very early days, but high-ranking officials from the European Union, European Commission were on site. So Yannick Dalmas was actually driving this thing with a technical 650 horsepower of power from that power plant. Other familiar faces around too. But we have had a number of questions about that from Stefan Moore. Says, since the mission H24 is out, what's our thoughts on alternative fuels, hydrogen, electricity, and motorsport cars in general? Tom Bacon is asking, is the appearance of the hydrogen vehicle at Spa over the weekend a realistic glimpse at the future of our sport? And our good friend and right turn lover, are we likely to see H24 as a Garage 56 entry? Any insight into why the LMS? That's a separate thing to do with ELMS calendar, which we've also had over the weekend. I think the answer from me on that one, on are we going to see H24 itself as a Garage 56 entrant? Probably not. It is very much to prove things like the viability of the infrastructure that's going to be required. They did actually fuel the car on pit lane from kit that was actually stored in the garage. It was certainly runnable at pace. It was not yet raceable. It is, however, early days, and as one or two people have pointed out, there was another project oddly enough, on an Odess LMP3 chassis run by a Dutch group, which is actually out and doing some racing at the moment. So it is technology that is maturing. We know, don't we, MP, that BMW are interested in looking into whether or not the new regulations that follow the current ones we're expecting, so say 2024, that they are interested to see whether or not that might be an avenue that they could come back into the top level of the sport. And at the moment are engaging, I suspect, to make sure that decisions aren't made for 2020 that get in the way of where they would like to be in 4 or 5 years' time. It might be that they decide to come in earlier with something a little more conventional, just to, rub the rusty bits off the race team, if you like. But interesting times. What do I think about alternative fuels?
Yeah.
It's coming. The reality is here. We could be Luddite about it, but it is coming. Things don't stand still in all sorts of ways. We've got to look at what comes next and what comes after that. And I'm not at home to, look at where we've come to from the days when the only reason for a Toyota Prius was for someone to be in some way carping it in the media about how wonderful a person they were. It's not like that anymore. I'm sure you've driven hybrid cars, MP, yes?
I have. Not many, but yes, I have.
And I've certainly seen in the few occasions on which I've driven them a massive difference in, let's say, 3/4 of a decade between the usability, the relevance, the accessibility of that technology. It's not a whim anymore. It is actually making a difference. It is far more efficient. The advantages of using it are far clearer, made far clearer. The accessibility of that efficiency is greater and greater with every iteration of the technology that makes its way forward. It's the same with electric vehicles. So for the first time today, oddly enough, a brand new version, I think it's the Mark II Nissan Leaf, on the roads around my home here in the UK. And again, you're looking there at another step forward in terms of efficiency. A good friend of mine, for the first time, took me on a pretty long trip in a Tesla for the first time. I've sat in the things, I've experienced the things over short drives, but not the full range of tech. Impressive stuff. You cannot ignore that is the direction that technology is beginning to take. And that is going to have to be taken into account across the whole gamut of motorsports, not just in the what have been thus far pretty niche products that are going full electric.
Yeah, and oddly enough, as someone who lives in Tesla's hometown, I've only sat in a Tesla. I've never actually gone for a ride in one. So that's maybe I'm failing as a resident of Fremont, California. My only question, which was unanswered regarding the new hydrogen prototype, is whether, as you'll sometimes find next to a stream or something where there's a good natural water source where you can rock up with your bottle and fill it up at the little spout. Are they planning on just leaving the car running between sessions so fans can walk up and fill up their little water bottles and have some nice little free automotive generated hydration?
Well, I should say, on display at the launch of this program at Spa, and it unfortunately came very close to a point where I had to rush off to do TV, so I handily got to all the presentation in French and none of it in English. But there was a very attractive bottled water line, which implies that it is, of course, the only product that's coming from the car. I don't think anybody's sitting there Dasani-like and taking it from the exhaust pipe, but it's a thought, isn't it? I mean, the theory is that it should be pure enough to drink.
Should.
I guess that's not sure I'm going to go.
Yeah, well, I guess that's why we don't see press conferences announcing Pennzoil with little champagne glasses filled with their finest 40 weight. But this one, how's this? A mechanic friend that I used to work with on a little Sports 2000 race team, he was famous for applying racing-related lubricants to things he would eat just to show us how strong the human body is, including putting Loctite on a slice of pizza and eating it. So I think I know who we should go to, at least to use as the human test dummy for drinking whatever comes out the back of this hydrogen prototype. And if he survives, maybe we can get others in on the game too.
It does take a little further than I'd be comfortable with the likes of Joe Bradley testing whatever he's found pooled on a paddock floor to see whether or not what's leaking. And he has done that many times live. But is it brake fluid? Is it whatever? And I think only been hospitalised 4 or 5 times, which is quite impressive. But all good. So yeah, I mean, it's coming. Hydrogen. When you speak to the really, really, really smart people, and I try to, and I don't just mean in motorsport, by the way, I mean across the automotive industry, hydrogen and fuel cell technology is certainly the tech that most of the really deep kind of blue sky thinkers would say has got the most prospect in the future. And the big thing that holds it back, of course, is infrastructure. So if that can be solved for the motorsport side of things and the safety aspects can be solved, I'd love to see what's going to be possible from new technology. I think it's fascinating. Of course, there are some downsides in terms of the soundtrack to some of our motorsport being very different in the future. But I think we've got to stay relevant. I'm not a fan of gimmick. I'm a major fan of technology demonstration. And let's wait and see if some of the really big brains that we have around motorsport MP can come and blow us away once again.
I also think this might have birthed a new off-season, I don't know if it's a game show. It might just be a featured segment on the Weekend Sports Cars presented by Cooper Tires. But I definitely think we need to engage drivers, mechanics, and fans and listeners to respond with their answers to what exactly would you drink that comes out the back of a race car? And there could be a variety of answers, who knows? But everyone will have different limits. Some people will say absolutely nothing. Then we will probably find some gems, some human beings that might warrant some regular monitoring by mental health officials. And they might tell us, look, whether it's pureeing rubber or oil or whatever, count me in. Bring me a fine pint glass filled with whatever I'm down. So
it's not that far removed from actually enjoying the smell of a race car, is it?
Well, and I forget who the first comedian was to roll this one out. I do recall laughing hysterically and never forgetting it afterwards. But the premise, which isn't too far, was a comedian saying the bravest person in the world was the first man, and I guess he assumed it was a man, was the first man to look up, see a cow on top of a hill, and say, "You see that thing hanging below the cow? I'm going to walk up, squeeze it, and drink whatever comes out of it. Basically saying that has to be the world's bravest person. I think this might be in the same general sphere. So who knows? Again, dear listeners, you tell us if this needs to be. It might even have to be off season. It could be next week's episode. But yeah, if this is a thing, if we need to pose this question to the racing community and roll in the answers as part of whatever episode, let us know. We are here to please, hopefully, educate or inform a little bit, but ultimately, we're here to please. And speaking of pleasing, Graham, I must tell you that with the delightful job you do of organizing and categorizing the questions that come in, the one following hydrogen fuel, which you have lovingly dubbed Zack Brown on IMSA, WEC, DPI, etc., has 1, 2, 3, 4 questions and or comments
just the top 4.
that among many others that really I think have struck upon a theme that I need to tell you. I had already planned to bring up this exact thing in tomorrow's recording of the Week in IndyCar with my friend Anders Krohn. This is actually going to be, so now it's going to be featured in both Week in features because it's definitely necessary. And I'll try and merge the questions here from David Barker, John Johnson, Joe Izzo, and so on. They follow along a theme of this, dear listener. Let's start with John Johnson's opening. Are you guys sick of Zack Brown's crap yet? ? The final straw for me is him saying United Autosports won't compete in LMP2 and IMSA, but he has no problem being in the lesser class in WEC. He's ruined McLaren. He killed Van Dorn. His Alonso to IndyCar thing is turning into a giant turd. Oh man, we're here 3 weeks in a row. We've got fecal conversations in the first portion. He said, "I'm so sick of this guy." What else, mate? I mean, there's a lot of things on the same theme of like, good Lord, this guy says he's doing everything and nothing, says everything, but the actual movement, we are doing this thing in this series, and it's more than words. Here's a verifiable thing. It seems like we have struck a vein.
Is it worth me just going through, because I was there. Unlike other people who've written interviews with Zack, I was actually there, and rather oddly, they've used my tape recording, but don't worry about that. I was actually there for the conversation with Zack on a range of subjects. So let's have the Zack 15 minutes, okay? So Zack Brown, if you didn't know, CEO of McLaren, the F1 side and everything apart from their GT racing side on the road cars. So he looks after the if you like, the pure racing side rather than the production-based racing side. Also, a board member of Motorsport Network. He, of course, has got interest in various ways with a number of drivers, not least, of course, Fernando Alonso, and he was certainly behind the move that brought Fernando to Indy last year. He is a co-owner of United Autosports, a US flagged but very much a UK based organisation, and that organisation has operational partnerships for various reasons with Walkinshaw down in Australia and with Andretti Autosports in the United States. So there are a range of questions that came up, one of which I'm sure you'll be dealing with on the Week in IndyCar to do with Stoffel Van Dorn.
Who I've since been told will be competing in Formula E, is all but assured to be competing in Formula E next year. But,
Formula E.
Yeah, Formula E, but that's neither here nor there.
But hey-ho, but what he did make very clear is there is a million billion miles between what he will actually talk about in terms of United Autosports and what he'll talk about with McLaren, and never the twain shall meet, other than if there eventually becomes a McLaren prototype offering that is available for customers, then of course United Autosports would be potentially a customer for that. But the key point this weekend was this. Not that long ago that we had a story, perfectly legitimate story, that what was being looked at probably for 2020 was a DPI program for United Autosports. They had made the decision they were not going to go to P2 in 2019 with the class split. Instead of that, they were going to do the Asian Series as a bridging program, and that they would be looking to move their principal program alongside continuing commitment in European Le Mans Series to a DPI program in the USA, and that looked at that stage likely to be a McLaren-powered car. They've made the decision in pretty rapid order for all sorts of reasons. That's now not going to be the direction they take. So first things first, confirm they will continue what's been a very successful LMP3 program, that the LMP2 program, the LMS, will also stay, although there's a slight edge to their LMP2 commitments. I'll come to that in a moment. But they are now looking at an entry into the FIWEC with at least one LMP2 car, likely I think one in year one from the 2019-2020 season. So effectively it's a further expansion of United Autosports programs. The other interesting part of that, by the way, before we get on to the McLaren part of it, is that they've made it very clear that they will not race in LMP2 going forward unless they have what they believe is a potential winning package. And that is a direct reference to the difficulties that they've had with maintaining a meaningful attack with the Ligier chassis. They switched at late notice to Michelin this weekend, and will continue to the end of the year with the Michelin chassis. And they won that truncated race with Felipe Albuquerque, and the first ever overall win in a prototype from young Phil Hansen. May well be, was being looked into yesterday, the youngest ever winner of a European Le Mans Series race at 19 years old. But they're making it very clear that they remain open should the Ligier chassis not prove to be competitive moving forward, with or without the Michelin tyres, that they remain open to looking elsewhere. And yeah, lots of rumblings about what may or may not be going on in terms of further changes, whether or not that be BOP, in other words, putting weight in an Orica, or whether or not that be another tweak to the rules or to the regulations about changes to the LMP2 chassis. We'll just have to wait and see what actually comes out from there. If we don't get those changes and we don't get that BOP, I think the reality is you're going to start to see other teams beginning to desert the other rival chassis to Oricas. At the moment, not quite all conquering, but certainly it would appear to be superior performing 07. So that was the United Autosports side of things. So no real shocks, but the surprise there was where the potential had been for a future DPI program that appears now to have gone away. And we can all speculate as to what the reasons were behind that. They say that the business model of ELMS and into the WEC suits them. They do have 3 Ligier chassis available, so that makes perfect sense in that regard. On the McLaren side, it was all about the forthcoming regulations about 2020 LMP1, the so-called hypercar, car, whatever we want to call it, regulations. And again, there's Zack saying, look, we are in the room. We are taking a look at it. Decision would be made end of this year and into early next year as to whether or not that's viable. The problem at this point is we're getting very short of time for anything that's a clean sheet of paper, or nowadays a clean screen, to be developed into a race car. That means that realistically, to get to the point where you're starting in September 2020, which is the first point at which the new rules cars would be expected to run at the moment, you would have to be designing from scratch a car, but before you can get there, making and winning the battle corporately to get the budgets to do it. So realistically, you're looking at manufacturers effectively having to have done most of that groundwork, whether or not that's basic design work and or the commercial work, some little time ago. and that's beginning to rattle a few cages, I think. It is getting quite late to get these cars to the point where they need to be. And the question then arises, are McLaren going to be in the ring? I think it's getting pretty tight for them to do so in year one. That said, the new rule set sort of supports rather better than previous rule sets because the ability to develop these cars is rather less. Sort of gets to the point where there is a better opportunity for OEMs or indeed privateers to come in year 2 or even year 3 of that regulation cycle. But it's time. We've said it before. I'll say it again now. I said it in a fairly major piece we put onto Daily Sports Car this afternoon. It's time for people to start to communicate this rather more clearly as to what we're going to see, when we're going to see it, and what does success look like. Because, frankly, 2 cars or even 2 factories is not going to hack it. This has got to be a big step forward, and it's got to involve a little bit of body armor with something other than manufacturers coming into the ring. That's the Zach Brown news for this week.
So, to summarize, McLaren will be entering IndyCar, IMSA DPI, WEC LMP2, also, I think your mic cut out, LMP1 Privateer and Hybrid, Indy Lights, NASCAR, NHRA Drag Racing, and I believe Scandinavian Ice Racing too, with links to United Autosports, Walkinshaw Racing, and Andretti Autosport. Does that sound about right? All those things are happening, guaranteed?
You know what? Someone reads out the list, it sounds ridiculous, but I think you've missed something. And I can't think what it could be. Oh, Moto 2. Yeah.
Moto, yes. There's new anti-handbrake grabbing technology being developed by McLaren too. So
yes.
Pretty amazing there. Yeah, and back to maybe the original tongue-in-cheek. I don't even know if it's tongue-in-cheek, Graham. This might be a little more serious than just ha-ha, but as I'll discuss tomorrow with my pal Anders Krohn on our Week in IndyCar, there are 2 reasons for folks to constantly be in the media saying all kinds of things that are constantly changing, constantly adding new things. You are either trying to gain publicity for yourself personally. There's something where you're trying to amplify yourself. Me, spotlight me. And or there's some sort of financial gain, professional gain, organizational gain. So It's usually one of those 2 things. Sometimes it's both. Hey, look here, how can I constantly have everyone looking at me or talking about me? Then you have the other, hey, if I do this, will this benefit me somehow, benefit whatever I'm a part of somehow? I don't think it is the former with Zack. Zack Daugherty was very well known as the boss of a famous World Championship winning Formula One team. He's in the spotlight constantly. So Zack talking about IndyCar, Zack talking about sports cars, I would say reasons for him to be doing this would not be on a personal level, because he is never going to gain more notoriety by talking about things that fall well below the radar of F1. So if it's just strictly him being a hound for the spotlight, he would ignore us and just talk F1 constantly. So I don't think it's a personal thing. As my pal Anders said, and this is just a conversation he and I had yesterday while previewing some of what we might cover in the IndyCar show, there is a reason to talk about things at this level, at this frequency, at this ever-evolving variety from a financial standpoint. Getting sponsors to buy in, getting investors, getting funded drivers to hear. I mean, would definitely be a reason to constantly be talking, constantly be throwing out options and iterations, many of which may never come to fruition. And I'll also say, for those who mentioned they'd like to hear us talk a little bit about the inside baseball bits of reporting and what we do, there are also some limitations we might mention, Graham, that I think we might be reaching in terms of like, oh, okay, really? All right, so you're going to go to the moon in an Alfa Romeo sponsored this, that, and the other, powered by peanut butter. And, okay, sure, yeah, there does come a point, I don't want to say crying wolf is involved, but there does come a point where you go, yeah, I think I might be reaching critical mass on stories related to all the things that Zach could, and look, we could also be proven completely wrong. Just a couple months from now, we could find out that McLaren Racing's in IndyCar, Van Dorn or Alonso will be piloting it, and that, again, everything that these new updates on LMP2 plans are going to happen. That, I think, would be the most practical and the easiest one for that box to be ticked, right? They have cars. They have LMP2 cars. They're a European-based team. They obviously have been running and continue to run in the ELMS. They have made the occasional appearances in the WEC. That's a pretty easy path to go forward with. But again, just the constant evolution and possibilities. I think the fact that we're hearing from our listeners kind of all at once saying, enough! Just either do it or don't, but good God, man.
I'll tell you what, I'll promise the listeners here and now, the next time I sit down with Zach, I'll put that point to him. I'll happily put that point to him. I actually have to say he's remarkably good company.
No, I love Zach. I mean, we're all friends. And if he hears this, I'm sure I'm going to get a call. And what the hell, man? But, look, I love the guy. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I wasn't doing all kinds of cool in-car stuff last month at the Monterey reunion in Zach's, variety of awesome cars because we don't get along. I love the guy. But at the same time, as someone who has written his fair share of Brown says this, McLaren might do that, and it could be this guy, you hope you don't end up being the idiot who has his name hanging off of a dozen maybe, could, might, possibly stories, and none of them happen. You certainly hope a couple come true, so people don't say, Jesus, Pruett, you'll just believe anything, won't you? And, he gets that too. He knows this game. I'll say this about Zach for sure, and I know you'll agree. Zach knows the media side of this game better than almost any team principal I have come across.
Oh, yeah.
There's nothing that happens by mistake. And
no.
I won't say there's a feeling of being played or manipulated. I will say that, again, I think we have kind of reached that point where, okay, no more talk. Actions are what we're going to be writing about unless there's another thing where you're like, okay, that really warrants a story because it's a development.
I think the point here is worth making is that he actually said himself, he said it more than once in answer to someone having been told that there wouldn't be about Formula One. There were four of us around the table. The very first person, of course, asked the question about Formula One, and he made it very clear that the wide divide between his interest in United Autosport and his role at McLaren. And I think for me, that actually encapsulates that gap. United Autosport, well-resourced team because it's been run very well as a business. And it's expanded because principally Richard Dean, operationally, Zach in terms of the commercial side, has done a darn good job of getting the right people and the right backers into those cars. And, I'm very aware of ongoing conversations about who will be the faces for the coming season and their campaigns in Asia, the campaigns in Europe in 2019 and then 1920 in WEC. Some conversations going on with some real bright young talents, and that's a really good thing. Where I absolutely agree with you is, how can we put this gently? I can't, so I won't. McLaren are one of those names in the sport that there's been too many excuses. The heritage is too important. It's too storied. It's a little bit like Williams, if you like, in Formula One. And I'm sure there are parallels as well in the IndyCar world, where it's time now to decide, make a decision, is the price of Formula One a price worth paying if you are simply unable to dig yourself out of that trench? And if it's not worth paying, then let's have a plan B and a plan C. And if that plan is IndyCar and that plan is LMP1, you know what? They'll have my support. But I find it actually depressing to see that fantastic organisation with the resources they've got underperforming to the extent that they currently do. I'm not here to point the finger. I'm not remotely expert enough to actually do that. But I think you would find in the situation that McLaren finds itself a huge amount of difficulty getting the commercial backing from the shareholders of McLaren and their backers to sustain 2 and maybe 3 major global or international projects while Formula One is still failing. The same applies, I think, to Ferrari. If they're not winning, then there's not going to be a great deal of happiness that they're doing other things as well as Formula One. If they're winning, then maybe. But if not, then it's all too easy to point the finger and criticise a lack of commitment to F1, which is absolutely the all-consuming raison d'etre behind what Ferrari do. And the same really comes here from McLaren. What's the plan for Formula One? If they can solve that, then maybe there's time and space to do the other things. But without doing that, it becomes too easy to criticise that being the reason why they shouldn't be doing other things. That is Zack's problem encapsulated. There's lots of things that would be very good for McLaren, but while they're still failing in Formula One, it's almost untenable that they would do them.
Might also be worth mentioning, just to close here, that we are both unabashed cheerleaders in wanting Zack to succeed in everything that he is trying to do at McLaren, and if those the desired expansion, building a McLaren DPI-ish type thing, whether it's to use an IMSA in the future or whatever this car thing becomes in the WEC, IndyCar, you name it. I mean, we want to see all these things happen.
It'd be awesome.
And I would even say not because of him, because it's good for the sport first. I mean, obviously, seeing Zack succeed, to me, there's only positives to that, but even removing him from the conversation, racing succeeds if we hear that expansion is happening in sports cars, open wheel, you name it, with either McLaren or 3 United Autosports or any of the other associations that he's built that you mentioned. So behind everything, we're hoping it all works. We also just know that we might actually need to do a story, Graham, documenting all the stories that have been written about what might happen, because there's a Zackopedia page we need to create or something.
That's a great idea.
Because I'm starting to lose track of all the machinations. We have a couple of great questions to move to next on tire manufacturers, and we have our friend Kevin Perez Frederico, who always sends in some great stuff, and our pal Stathis Coco has sent in a couple. I did spend some time yesterday speaking with the head of Michelin's North American racing program for a magazine feature I'm doing in the next issue of Racer. So I can't uncork all of that in providing some of the responses here. But let's dive into those next, Graham. Maybe starting with Kevin, who says, "Hello, Marshall and Graham. Do you see Falcon, Hello. Dunlop, or Yokohama ever returning to GTLM in the future?" I will throw out the benign, and I apologize, but the rather benign, never say never. If we look at Falcon, they found value at one point, and I would say, not being a part of their marketing team, Graham, but knowing how that small program was uplifted so quickly and really became, for those of us who have that David-leaning mindset instead of the Goliath-leaning mindset, we loved them. We just loved seeing them go out and fight and knock down the big full factory auto manufacturer teams, being just a privateer team with a tire manufacturer as their entry point into the factory GT Wars. Loved seeing that. I think they got a lot out of it. Can't tell you exactly why they felt that they got all they needed and left, but I don't know if we will see them back, Kev, just because other than maybe drifting, I don't see the Falcon name associated with much in the way of motorsports here in North America, at least in the things that I keep an eye on intently or even on the fringes. As for Dunlop or Yokohama, Dunlop, at least for me, since the question was IMSA GTLM.
Yep.
Dunlop has been a supplier to a lot of series in sports cars here for many, many years. I've never really seen them in a factory-heavy direction, at least in this GTLM type regard. Yokohama, I mean, I know that they were involved in GT. I think GT2 in the ALMS might have been the place that I remember there more than anything else.
Do you remember BAM running them? And certainly BMW ran Yokohama, didn't they?
Yeah, so again, this is going back a little ways. I tell you, of the three that you've mentioned, Falcon, Dunlop, and Yokohama, Yokohama is the one that I would think might have the most to gain, branding-wise, because if you think of all the ground Continental has made from a marketing standpoint by being involved in North American sports car and endurance racing, if you think of Pirelli with what they've done in World Challenge, obviously Michelin has been the go-to gold standard for many years. There are a couple of brands that have really made their name and or tied themselves to North American sports cars, Graham, and I would say, at least, again, externally, they have gained ground. They have made their presence known with a loyal buying audience. Knowing that Yokohama's been here in the past, I would say they might be in a better position looking at GTLM, since that will be the only open competition allowed in the WeatherTech Sports Car Championship going forward. That could be a place for them to make a bit of headway. Also, we come back to the ever-present point of, but Michelin has invested so much in their tires, and not just IMSA, but obviously the WEC. Boy, that is a big mountain to knock down if you want to get in there. But we did see Falcon do it on occasion. So of the three, I can't say that I would see any of them jumping in anytime soon, Kev. But I would say Yokohama does stand out as the one that might be able to benefit the most from attempting.
I think the other thing to look at as well is it's emergent brands. If you've actually got this predominant brand in any marketplace, an emergent brand might just see that opportunity. I know, there was we had the Toyo brand with Flying Lizard sniffing around for an opportunity, but you're right, it is this business around it, just that giant mountain to climb. What you don't want to do is to go in and frankly get your arse handed to you every other weekend on live TV. But there is an opportunity with open competition. The problem comes when you have that predominant brand coming into it. There are lots of things currently moving in the marketplace of the tyre manufacturers in international motorsport, and I think we're going to see some pretty dramatic headlines. We've already seen one, obviously, with the major changeover coming with Michelin for the majority of the IMSA package, including the support packages. That's a massive commitment from Michelin. I'm at the moment, and I'm saying nothing other than tracking three major stories that directly relate to tyre manufacturers in three different major championships, which are relevant to our listeners here on the Week in Sports Car podcast. When they will come to fruition, and indeed whether all three of them will, it remains to be seen. But it's these are those kind of stories in kind of the process of coming to fruition that we'll bring you, and we'll talk about that. But it is always about, isn't it, MP, this difference between a model that says competition is great, therefore open tyre competition. At the moment, there are remarkably few areas where that's possible, and fewer still where that's a reality. The massive bastions for them still are probably still only Super GT in Japan and VLN in the depths of the Nordschleife. And whilst there are still championships where you can go head to head, they are becoming fewer and fewer. But it's good. Falcon For me, I think that's the kind of decision that tends to come and go with a change, an ebb and a flow of personnel involved in making those decisions, those spending decisions. And sometimes it can come down to a preference in terms of how you want to spend your marketing money. Falcon's still very active in VLN. In fact, fantastic effort. With race wins this year, and actually last week's VLN race with a fantastically liveried 2019 spec Porsche 911 GT3R, GT3 or GTD in IMSA money, having a crack at that race. So Falcon still, punching away in VLN competition. Wouldn't count out them coming back. I think that might just be one of those moments where someone pulls out the file, dusts it off, and thinks, that was cool. Let's go and have another look at that one. I would tend to think they're, of the three that you mentioned, up there with Yokohama. I'm trying to recall from memory, it was a Ferrari that did Yoko's, wasn't it? West Racing.
We had Hankook in there as well.
Yep.
I mean, there have been plenty of little forays, some a little bit more sustained than others. We had a Lamborghini that I think was meant to Gallardo, that was meant to a West, that was meant to be on Yoko's, and I'll have to look back through.
You've had Kumho's, where Kumho's now before now on an LMP2 car. So all sorts of people have had a crack at this. It would be good to see someone stepping up. I do like to see a little bit of competition. I certainly like the minnow. I think the minnow is a good thing.
I have an idea. I think I might have the perfect brand. Cooper Tires, our own primary sponsor for the
all
entire
the time
year Challenger brand. Cooper Tires. Let's go get them, buddy. I will promise to not be involved on the competition side. Therefore, success will be possible. So, there we go. All right. Well,
Status Coco, though, is asking some things. I know you don't want to go too hard into the Michelin stuff, but will Michelin use IMSA to boost performance in LMP2? In the ELMS and WEC, will they develop tyres for LMP1 privateers for next season? When are we going to learn about the secret tyre manufacturer? It's a secret. I can't tell you. I'm just joshy. It is a secret. The answer really here is we've seen a big step forward in Europe with the Michelin LMP2 tyre this year, evidenced by the fact that United Autosports stepped over this weekend. Didn't get a chance to try their dry weather tyre, I'm afraid, but the wet weather tyre worked pretty well for them. We have got a real world battle in ELMS and WEC in LMP2, and I think that bodes extremely well for what will be coming with Michelin for DPI and LMP2 in the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship next year. I think you're going to see records broken.
And knowing with what's taking place in IMSA right now, with the very private testing going on with Michelin, it's funny. I asked one of their folks, and they said we're not actually even sending any media folks at this point. Internal media folks. There's no photos being. We're not even at that stage yet. We're truly just gathering info. But I know that on the prototype side status, we have what they are going to use for 2019. It is all WEC P2 based tires as the starting point. So there will be there are and will continue to be some modifications specifically for the American market, but rather than start fresh with a brand new construction for IMSA's DPIs and P2s, they are using existing WEC P2 tire as what they're building off of, and there'll be some slight modifications to that, and at least for what I'm told at this stage, and again, I'm just sharing what I know that I can, they are planning on 2 compound options, and they're also not planning, at least right now, to do anything different between DPI and P2, any kind of differences there. So it looks like there's some pretty severe comfort, Graham, in the WEC P2 tire with slight modifications, knowing that most American tracks are not as smooth as what they face in Europe, but with some mild modifications, The European P2 product is what IMSA believes is what Michelin believes can more than cover IMSA's entire prototype field, and also with, keep in mind, possibly an slight uptick in performance next year, knowing that DPIs will no longer be tethered to P2-based performance.
It's going to be interesting, isn't it? Because the two qualities that you're looking for are the speed, the grip, what you can actually get out of a lap time with those tyres, but also the longevity of those tyres. Now, okay, there are two entirely different competitive arenas, if you like, in IMSA competition. There's a regular 2.25 hour races and then the very long distance races. So what we have seen with the Michelin tyres in European and global competition, very quick, and in qualifying trim, the Michelins have really had it this year. But the Dunlops, in terms of the longevity of the tyre, tended to kind of come back into it. But Michelin are going to be bringing a very high quality product to North America. It is going to be a step forward. I think there's little doubt of that. But it is, I think, going to be a factor for these teams to determine whether or not they want to take that risk in terms of double stinting a tyre. That's not always been possible or not. I think that adds something really pretty special to sports car racing. It always has been a bit of it for me, and maybe that'll be something where we might see a little bit more of it in IMSA competition next year.
And let's scroll down. We have 8 pages of questions, and we are there's one here I quite like. Well, while you're having a quick look, I was just going to tell you we're not quite an hour in. We've only got 20 minutes left, though. Only got 20 minutes left. So, but yes.
Let's try Eric Hartrider, Gigi and Marshall. As journalists, who has been the biggest impact, or who's had the biggest impact on you? Who were your mentors and inspirations? You want to crack on with that one first?
Sure. That one's very easy. Absolutely first and foremost, and I am still mildly amazed that he doesn't run away and actually stays and talks to me when I speak to him. Nigel Roebuck. I am a devotee to Autosport magazine's Nigel Roebuck. Grew up reading his 5th column, his Formula One race reports, his musings on any and everything. And then when he moved to Motorsport magazine, loved that less reporter-ish role and more just telling the tales that struck him type of freedom. Multiple pages of just glory. And he's recently gone back to Autosport. I admittedly have not read or picked up on that. I don't know if I should say there's a little bit of tribal separation there, but absolutely Nigel Roebuck. Not only immensely talented with a pen or typewriter or keyboard, but just, yeah, I know for myself, my friend and former racer colleague David Malsher, we both, I guess, grew up just learning and reveling in any and everything that Nigel wrote, and having gotten to know him a little bit in recent years, and much better even in the last year or two, it's amazing seeing this short, balding, sometimes slightly hunched over Englishman come trotting into the Daytona Media Center, or Indy 500 Media Center, and among, you could have whomever up on the podium, whichever racing legend you name it, and just seeing Nigel, for me, that is absolute hero worship. I try not to do that, and I love embarrassing him by telling him how much he has meant to me and inspired me when I was just a racing mechanic, Graham. I would go down to Tower Books and Records on El Camino Avenue in San Mateo, California, where I was born, each week, and buy the new issues of Autosport and also On Track magazine. And then in '92, when Racer magazine came online, it would be a pretty thick little packet of magazines I would take home. But Nigel and his work was something that I just read with absolute devotion, especially because Formula One is the thing that I loved just about more than anything growing up. That might sound odd, knowing that IndyCar has been my lifelong everything, along with sports cars. At least for me, Graham, these are the things that I've loved, but also worked in for my entire life.
Yep.
So having, to me, it's always interesting. Like you look at maybe the world, some of the most recognized athletes in whatever sport, and you'll find out that their favorite sports are completely different from the ones that they're in. Or musicians, the world's greatest rock stars might love country music or R&B. I think it might be the same thing here, where being so heavily involved in North American open wheel and sports cars, Formula One was just a fantasy land, so I just invested so heavily in that, and it was all thanks to Nigel. And I might have mentioned this before on this podcast or another. I still have it, and I need to bring it and really embarrass him one day. But one day, probably in 1990 or so, maybe 91, I don't know the exact year. But my dad had a photocopier in the office of his Saab, Park Road Saab service in Burlingame, California. And I decided one night, Graham, that I needed to consolidate every Nigel Roebuck article in every fifth column, every Formula One report that I had accumulated in all the magazines I owned. And so I cannot tell you how many hundreds of pounds of pro sports and whatever else is that I brought with me. But I went down to the shop late one night and spent hours upon hours photocopying everything. And, this was, again, 25, 30 years ago. I still have it. It's this big, thick, 2 or 3 inch wide binder of all of his fifth columns and you name it. And I used to just read through them like an anthology. So that's...
We've got to get you at Daytona in a T-shirt with Nigel's face on it. That's got to be done.
Right there. I'm with you. That absolutely has to happen. And we actually have been trying to do a podcast on a couple of topics that he said he'd be keen to do. So I hope we can do that as well. And I'll just mention the one other one, which might sound a little Homerish, but it's true. Other one is my longtime colleague, friend, co-pilot, co-conspirator, Robin Miller. And I love the guy to death. He's the biggest a-hole in the world, but in the best way. He admits it. And at his core, Robin is a sweetheart, but his public persona is a little gruff, and he plays it up just as I play up mine a little bit from time to time. But Robin Miller's another one on the IndyCar side, and I know that there are some, maybe even more than some, who are not fond of Robin and or his work. I just find brilliance in it as an old newspaper man. And granted, he started out same as me. He was a IndyCar mechanic back in the 60s. Just amazing to think of him at the Speedway at 17 years old. But Robin's been another huge inspiration, so I'll quit prattling on. But whereas Roebuck has this amazing ability to paint pictures with words and make you feel as if you know Mario Andretti, Gilles Villeneuve, Jean Behra, whomever it is that growing up knew the names but had never met any of these folks. Nigel has the amazing ability to make you feel as if you're friends with the legends of the sport. Robin has the ability to tell a story. Robin can spin a yarn about the simplest, most mundane thing and make it a truly enjoyable and breezy 300 words or 1,000 words, whatever it might be. And so I will not claim to possess any of their talent. I will absolutely admit that I'm jealous and constantly trying to unlock the code how to be more like them. And I'm very thankful to know both men and consider them both friends. They would not say the same, but at least from my end, I am happy to make such admissions.
Well, I'll rattle through my two, one of whom is a close personal friend, the other one I've never met. But I would say to you, my first inspiration was actually not a motorsport journalist, but an automotive journalist, and a gentleman by the name of Russell Bulgin, who wrote. I first became aware of Russell's work when he was, I think it was either Performance Car or Car magazine, and it was the style of writing. Russell died very young, plagued by cancer, but he was a thoroughly entertaining writer, and it was just a different way of reading about a subject I was fairly passionate about, very much a petrolhead, and a storyteller. And that, in that way, I guess very much the same as Nigel, in that it is that storytelling rather than chronology sort of style that appealed to me. And so Russell's writing was firmly appealed, and his a collection of his works that was sold, I think, in memory of him and for charity for the Royal Marsden, which is a hospital actually based just down the road from where I'm standing talking to you right now, by his friends. That book is described as unobtainium, and I'd love a copy of it. So Russell was the first one. The second one is my founding editor at Daily Sports Car, a man who gave me the opportunity to do what I love, a man by the name of Malcolm Cracknell. And I would say that Malcolm is something of a visionary. Mid-90s, decided he'd had enough of teaching at a boys' school and wanted to do something that lit the fire again, and established a thing called Sports Car World in the mid-90s when the internet was very young. And that gave me and a number of other people the opportunity to come and try their hand at doing this motorsport journalism thing. I was and am a trained journalist. I was unlucky enough to be caught the wrong side of an industry downturn. And it was many years after I left my journalistic training that I actually finally worked professionally as a journalist. And Malcolm gave me that opportunity and taught me a huge amount in terms of structure, in terms of the morality of actually the way in which we report on this one, and very many of the little bits of wisdom that I pass on to the youngsters that come through our doors came directly from Malcolm. I have that to thank him for. I've nothing more to say about Malcolm than that, other than, love him dearly. He's a fabulous individual. He's not quite as crotchety as Robin, but he can't be far back from that. Definitely, I think the Americanism is ornery, isn't it?
Ornery. He's an ornery. SOB.
Yeah. Yes. But funny as. I mean, Malcolm, not in the best of health nowadays, does have a mobility scooter, and fabulously fashioned the bodywork of the mobility scooter to look like a miniature Land Rover. So, which is hilarious. But it's that everything's a story. Everything is personal. Everything, and everybody is given the opportunity to tell their story, and that, I'm afraid, is sometimes how the inconceivable becomes news, becomes an opportunity for people to follow that and to get involved in that. And at times that leads to something quite wonderful. And we've had a number of occasions when somebody's had the opportunity to just share that vision, and somehow programs have got off the ground. I owe him absolutely everything in this business, and I've nothing more to say about it than that.
Let's jump to a couple of questions here on GTE and GT3, and with the nickname of the last name Assassin. You see certain names, Graham, and this is premeditated murder. Chris Alvaby, maybe? Alphaby? I don't know. I apologize. I'm sure there's mangling. There's at least a couple of knife wounds there. I can't say if I killed you altogether, Chris. You've sent this in a couple times. I apologize, as Graham notes. We try to get to all that we can each week. Sometimes sending them back in will help, which certainly helps here. Chris says, will we see GTE Pro or AM teams compete in the Sebring 12-hour next year? Mm-hmm. And what would be your dream GTE car? So this is obviously piggybacking off of Friday's WEC race, where GTE Pro and AM entries will participate. Curious, Graham, if you think or have heard any rumblings come next March if some of those 10-hour-ish racers on Friday might stay and play for 12 more in under IMSA sanction on Saturday.
Well, I think the answer is they might, but it probably won't be the same car. So certainly there is the potential for some of those teams to do both races. There are certainly potential for some of the teams to have additional cars for one or two of those races. Now, I mean, a couple of teams that might, okay, and I'm operating at the moment without having had the facility of asking them. Gulf Racing have a second Porsche in the fabulous Gulf colours, and might decide that actually that would be a fabulous place to be. It would, of course, be a highly unusual thing in IMSA competition now to have a GTLM car with a Pro-Am driving squad in it, because that generally tends to go to GTD. One of the others that just might, and this is quite an interesting prospect, is Paul Dalla Lana. As we know, has got one of the newest of the brand new V8 Vantages. He will not be able to race that car in the WEC, because the WEC it's not been homologated yet for AM competition. But he will be able to race his new car in IMSA competition. So it's just possible we might see Paul, Pedro Lamy, and Matthias Lauda in the fabulous old lady that is the current V8 Vantage GTE in the WEC race, and the new car, the AMG turbo engine car, in the 12-hour. That would be quite fun, wouldn't it?
Oh, it absolutely would. Let's.
What would be my dream GTE car? He asks as well. You know what I miss? I miss the cookie. I miss the slightly kind of left field. I was talking to someone about this. I miss the days of Spiker and Morgan and Panos. Actually, it came out of the Don Panos thing and the TVRs. TVR, I hope they come and do it. I hope they come and do it. I hope one of these smaller, more boutique manufacturers finds the budget and comes and takes on the world. Maybe gets a great result once or twice, maybe goes down in a blaze of glory, hopefully not literally. But I'd like to see a boutique manufacturer taking on the BMWs, the Porsches, the Ferraris, the Aston Martins of this world, and having a good old crack. I miss that aspect of GTE, GT2. It's a shame that for the moment at least has gone, and I hope that comes back. That would be great to see.
I don't know if they would fit, Graham, but the one boutique manufacturer that I know I would love to see the most is Koenigsegg. And
yep.
I mean, their cars tend to make so much power that there would have to be some extreme efforts to get them into that 500 to 550 range we see as kind of the general target being presented. The reason I would love to see Koenigsegg, although I don't think there's any good business argument knowing that they're a low-volume manufacturer, but of the boutique constructors putting GT-ish hypercar things on the road, they really seem to be the only ones trying to advance the state of technology at play. And whether it's the engine internals and rotating mass and trying to delete this, and just really seems like their mission, on top of making cars that go 8,000 miles an hour, is to say, hey, cool, okay, internal combustion engines and braking systems and this and that's cool, got it. Where can we maybe challenge or question some of the norms, and is there something we can replace? Is there something we can make redundant? Is there something we can improve on the efficiency side in ways that go beyond the normal, we improved, emissions by 2%, or we gained 1% in fuel efficiency? There just seems to be a spirit there that I like about them, Graham, where I would think in a GTE/GTLM construct, they might be able to prove some of that and maybe get the automotive world thinking a little bit freer. I don't know if that serves them in any way. I just know that they're among the only ones that stand out to me, at least, where I go, thanks, guys. Thanks for really pushing, because you care.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, we know that Christian Koenigsegg has talked about the new hypercar regulations, and there's a speculation that he actually didn't understand what they might be. But one can hope that, number one, they might find their way into that. But if they don't, that his interest is piqued enough in sports car racing to have a look at the other opportunities in regulation. Yeah, it's missing, isn't it? Something is missing at the moment. We have had through just about my entire lifetime of sports car racing, where there's always been, a pretender. There's always been somebody coming in and looking at Ferrari and looking at, at Porsche and thinking, we'll have some of that. I can remember a conversation relayed to me by Martin Short at Roll Centre Racing that he had at the time. Martin was the importer for the Mosler brand into Europe and built the race cars too. I had this conversation with Stefan Rattel, and Stefan saying words to the effect of, and Stefan, if you're listening, apologise if I'm paraphrasing, he doesn't understand why British GT racers didn't just buy a Ferrari or a Porsche. And Martin laughed that one off and said, just doesn't get it. We want to take them on. We want to actually challenge that established order, which is why we had this wonderful period of time into and beyond the start of GT3, where you did get the Morgans, the Nobles, the Ascaris, the Centuras, the Harriers, you name it, they were just coming time and time again, trying something different, trying to take them on, and at times being utterly hopeless, but at times it worked. And when it worked, it was glorious. Without that, we wouldn't have had the glorious thing that was the TVR Speed 12 and the Cerberus Speed 12. The Centura, which I know made its way across here with a Judd engine and just a marvellous looking thing. And that spirit needs to be back in sports car racing somehow. We've got to the stage where it's a little bit too homogenised. I'd like to see it back. And Christian von Koenigsegg, or any of your mates, if you're listening, come on, have a go. You'll find a massive fan base. And the same with James Glickenhaus. Come and have a go, sir. We'd love to see you try.
Amen to that. Well, I'm going to grab two questions that fall into an area that and hopefully our listeners know is one of my favorites, and that is sound. So we have both Joe and Dennis Zosek, who've thrown in things here on that topic. Let's go with Joe, who says, what is the main reason why GTE manufacturers go for a turbo engine option? It's going to be an awful shame when we lose the sound of the Corvette and Porsche if the rumors of switching power plants are true. I thought BOP would leave engine options more open. I would say, Joe, outside of BOP, outside of it being GTE manufacturers, I would say we're talking more about market shifts for those brands. Specifically on the GTE and GTLM front, I know that last week we reminded a dumb me that no, indeed, BMW did race a GTLM car that was GT3 based and really was nothing like the road car that it sold. So, yeah, there is some wiggle room potentially for manufacturers, true manufacturer racing, for them to maybe play around with what engines are used. But I think for the most part, barring rare exceptions, what we've seen of late is Ford's twin-turbo V6, Road Car GT, which we believe some of those have been sold now. They race a twin-turbo V6. We look at, Aston Martin with their new motor, which is no longer the Howling V8 in Pro. It is the new turbo. This is just reflecting what it is they're building and selling. And I would say that when it comes to Corvette and this mid-engine turbo that we have seen testing, that's not them making changes on the racing side. That's them taking what they are planning to sell to the world and using it in competition. And on the Porsche front, Graham, we have a case where we really hope, we never lose the amazing 911 RSR's flat six megaphone of the gods, non-turbo exhaust sound. At the same time, knowing that Porsche has made and sold turbocharged 911s for many, many decades, if that's the decision they made for their competition cars, it wouldn't be strange. I would say I've heard as many turbocharged Porsche racing engines as I have naturally aspirated, and this again goes back to the 70s of just a turbo, single turbo flat six, twin turbo flat six, whether it's GT cars or prototypes. Certainly not an abnormal sound for those who've been in or following for many years. In modern times, though, it seems like smaller displacement turbos, that's where the market is heading, and wouldn't surprise me if the vehicles that are then taken from the production line and sent to compete in the WEC, in IMSA, and wherever, happen to be a direct reflection of that shift. So I don't think it's so much a case, though, of the racing side. It's just the production side being reflected in competition.
Completely agree, and in fact, those that remember the genesis of the current RSR Porsche would possibly remember that there was some surprise that they didn't go for a turbo engine at that stage, and that was actually quite an edgy decision. Of course, it's had some success. Thought occurs to me, though, MP, thinking about my own road car history, my good lady and I have been together for some nearly 20 years. And whilst Trudy and I have been together, I've never owned a non-turbocharged car. The last 7 cars I've had have had some form of turbocharged engine, and it's become, a pretty predominant thing if you're looking for something that's got fuel efficiency or performance or whatever. Why do they choose that? Well, because it does help with efficiency. It helps with torque as well, and that's something that in a racing engine you're looking for. And for me, it would be lovely to think that actually we can maintain that level of variety. But as we saw, for instance, in the LMP1 days, when it started with this fantastic period of time where everybody that had a car did something very, very different, over a period of 2 to 3 years, things started to homogenize when it became obvious that the solution that one manufacturer had got to was the optimum. And I think that's where we're heading in terms of engine technology. Here's the set of rules you've got. Here's the parameters you're allowed. This is how big an engine you're allowed, with or without the turbos. At some point, the sums from the same computers are going to come to the same conclusions. And I think that's where we are with that. And I just hope that someone thinks a little bit left field.
I'll just throw this out there because it fell into my brain quickly. So, at the most recent...
It's going spilling out the other end.
Look, it's a cluttered mess. You know that there's a full episode of hoarders going on in my brain of all kinds of useless things I should throw out. One thing that just fell off the corner of the table that caught my attention was while at the most recent IMSA race at Monterey, I guess maybe falling in line a bit with Joe's question, and also the next one from Dennis Zosek on, we need to mandate naturally aspirated engines in at least one class in IMSA. It would be a sin if we lose the savage scream of the 911 RSR. I don't care what the future is for street cars, but turbos muffle sound, and if you don't have the sound in racing, what's the point? Amen, brother Dennis. What stood out to me, Graham, and I think this is while I was on pit lane, I forget which session, but was on pit lane towards pit in, and why that's important is because in that section there are garages behind pit lane and a bit of overhead hospitality suite, so there's a backstop for sound, so you get a lot of reverberation. And while standing there, to Joe's point, to Dennis's point, what stood out were the fine, naturally aspirated vehicles. They really caught your attention because if we think of the prototype class, or DPIs, 3 of the 4 manufacturers use turbocharged engines. Obviously, the Spec Gibson V8 in the WEC P2 cars, naturally aspirated those. I love the sounds of those. If we move into the GT classes, though, we have a turbocharged BMW. We have turbocharged BMWs, we have turbocharged Fords, which we already mentioned just a little while ago, and we have naturally aspirated Corvettes, naturally aspirated Porsches. We don't get to see them as often as we would like, but we also have the turbocharged Ferraris too. And then you step into GT Daytona / GT3, and there's a good mix there for sure, but there's a definite mix between turbocharged Acura, turbo Ferrari, turbo BMW. We have the great naturally aspirated V10 shared by Audi and Lamborghini in that platform. We have the Lexus naturally aspirated V8, which you can spot that car anywhere. The Mercedes AMG and its V8, obviously Porsche in their flat 6. But the finer point, as they have mentioned, in all three classes, there are lots and lots of turbocharged motors. And I think because of that heavy tipping point, it really does make the stars, the Corvette V8s, the 911 RSRs, and others really stand out. And that's what I was picking up on pit lane there in that little sound garden of just, wow, boy, those sound great. And what stood out and surprised me the most, and I did capture some of it, so I hope to get this out in a podcast sometime soon, was the Acura Team Penske ARX 05 DPIs and their 3.5-liter twin-turbo V6s. It sounded, Graham, maybe it was just, again, the specific place I was standing, and maybe it only came across there. Those things sounded like dragsters, just as, like, wow!
Oh, yeah.
Did not sound like a typical twin-turbo V6, and it was just that, because the Nissan DPIs, twin-turbo V6s, and again, there are plenty of other TT V6s in the series. It was just the Acuras that had that, whoa, that thing sounds amazing. I think it was Dane Cameron, he wasn't in the car at the time, was standing just behind their pits, and I was talking with him, and I think his teammate Montoya went by, and I was like, dude, that thing sounds baller. I mean, it was just totally unexpected. If you closed your eyes, you never would have guessed it was a twin-turbo V6. You would have thought it was some sort of, rocket fuel crazy thing. So,
well, here's the other one. I mean, because we talk about that, and I don't disagree, by the way, guys, that, some of the twin-turbo V8s are pretty underwhelming in the sound department. And then you've got the Bentley Continental GT3.
Oh.
But that's a turbo V8.
Amazing, though.
Yep, but it sounds like some kind of low-flying Reno Unlimited racer. It's absolutely amazing sound, and like I say, what we'll miss, I'm sure, if it continues to go in this direction, is the opportunity to close your eyes and identify the car by the sound, which you can certainly do. You go to a Blancpain race where you've got just about every GT3 car on the planet. You can do that. You can play that game, and it's great fun. But the Bentley for me is one of the standouts. Fantastic 21st century race car sounds. Absolutely fantastic stuff from the guys at M Sport. And long may that continue.
Only about 20 minutes left to go, Graham. Where should we? Sorry, that's probably going tiresome, but I just love the fact
let's.
Well, hold on. We should acknowledge yet again my stupidity. We've had to record this now. Try to record this multiple times today, and in both instances, just as we started off last week's show, where I shot you a note and said, "All right, I'll be ready in about 5." A Pruett 5 is what to the rest of the world, Graham?
I should say 15? A working day.
Yeah. A Pruett 5 is at least a global 15 to 20. So yeah. Anyways, I just love the fact that even though I probably know my BS, I love getting called out for it. It's a good thing. And then
I'm gonna dive for one here because it deals with the joy and I'm happy to say it was my joy. It's Jeremy Charette. Hello, Jeremy. Graham, I've never seen you as overjoyed or speechless as you were on the Circuit Safari bus at Fuji last year. Has there been talk of bringing the Circuit Safari to other rounds of the WEC or the series like IMSA? I'd leap at the chance to see these track weapons up close in anger. Yes, there was. In fact, this is a fine tradition that comes from the wacky world of Japanese motorsports. And if you're not sure what Circuit Safari is, do look it up on the WEC website. There are a couple of videos, one with my friend and colleague Louise Beckett with the TV crew, the WEC TV crew, and the other, which was a social media thing we did on another of the buses, which was myself with Juliette Zhu, the social media manager at WEC, on board touring coaches, buses, with fans, just race fans, and they take the coaches out, the buses out, under safety car conditions. So you are in the left-hand side of the racetrack, and then they release the race cars at near full racing speed. And it is one of the most awesome things I've ever experienced. It has been done elsewhere. Famously, last season they did it at British GT with, of all things, a double-decker 1950s, 1960s Routemaster London bus, the one with the open platform at the back. It's fantastic. They did look, I know, at doing it at other tracks. I have to say, there were one or two of my journalistic colleagues who were invited along, found the experience awesome, and then got all, how can I put this, self-righteous, I think I'd say. Having enjoyed thoroughly the experience, then were particularly kind of prissy about the way in which it was reported. That didn't help, and I think the rather European attitude to health and safety nowadays didn't help either. But you know what? We're going to Japan in a couple of weeks' time, and we're going to do it again. So yes, we're going to do it, because I'm not aware that anybody's actually ever ended up on a bus with a ball of flame down the start-finish straight, because generally speaking, if you give these racing drivers instructions on pain of death, they will not drive into the side of a bus. They generally aren't going to do that. So we are going to do it there. I'd love to see it happen elsewhere. Feel free to tell the championship organizer of your choice that you think that's a great idea. Send them pictures of the cars on track. Send them copies of the video and ask them what they think. Because you know what? Access is good. Access is fine. And anything we can do to get more people coming to see this fabulous sport of ours is fine by me. People mess about with it. If anybody breaks the rules in it, they'll get sanctioned, and they damn well should be. But in this instance, I can tell you it really was as much fun as I made it look. And I'm intending to have exactly the same fun again this time, if they let me go on the bus. They'll let me go on the bus.
Do you think the prissy ones were just upset because they were forced to strap on adult diapers before the bus ride for fear of losing all bowel control with cars zooming by that fast?
I'm not going to name names because it wouldn't be fair to John. But to actually say that you know, they didn't quite see the appeal, then going on the bus and saying it was wonderful, but afterwards, under whatever pressure that they felt, to actually write, you know, oh, safety, and come on, man, it's been going on for decades. You know, the reality there is that you've either got to grip these things and go with it, or you've got to take a stance to start with. But, you know, to go and enjoy it yourself and then decry the possibility for other people to do it, I think was particularly, not a fan. But no, if you get a chance, come to Japan. Go to a Super GT race. It is done by lottery, by the way. There is so much demand. It's done by lottery. And I can tell you, I might have been excitable on that bus, but it was nothing compared to some of the fans. And it was families. It was mums and dads. It was very young children. You know, it was elderly fans as well. And it was a joyous thing to behold. A busload of people just having a fantastic time being race fans and a privileged position. And I heartily recommend it to any and all of you that get that opportunity.
I'm going to grab a question here from Travis Bender about a topic that's been a little bit near and dear to me. He said, with the change of the IMSA GTD Lexus program from 3GT Racing to Vassar Sullivan for 2019, what could become the new home for Jack Hawksworth? He has shown incredible pace this year. Could he make the move with the program to the new team? Travis, while I think I was the one who wrote about this first, we're obviously still waiting for confirmation that it will happen. I can tell you that dear Mr. Hawksworth, who's come into IMSA now, still a young guy, 25, 26 maybe, comes into IndyCar after comes into IMSA after IndyCar. Trying to think of a polite way to say this, but maybe I just need to say it the way it is. There's no way in hell this kid should spend any more than the 2018 season in GTD. And that's no disrespect to any of the other top flight drivers in GT Daytona. I will say that as a young driver like Jack, who is definitely IndyCar grade first and foremost, if this is where he has to earn his living, Graham, fine, I get that. He gets that. I also know that there is a great desire to be back in IndyCar. I don't think there are any real opportunities for him at the moment there. So that door might have closed, if not temporarily, maybe even longer term. But at minimum, Jack Hawksworth should be in a Daytona Prototype International or a WEC P2. He is definitely, though, someone that if an opportunity in one of the many new Cadillacs that will be springing forth with Juncos Racing, JDC Miller Gainesco, who knows, Spirit of Daytona, however much we might have them next year. Yeah, this is just a kid playing with the kind of talent and speed that if GTD is the only thing he has, then good for him, and he can make a living doing that. But I hate to see someone that good racing in a category that low at his age. And so if the racing gods agree, we will see Jack in a DPI or a P2, because that kid can do even more incredible things there. So I know, Travis, that's something that he would love to see happen, and definitely without speaking against any opportunities that may continue to move with the program. But yeah, this is a kid that I hope we're no longer talking about association with production-based racing after 2018. Let's see. Let's move to the next question from Theodore Karuper. Paul, I think we might have met recently, and if not, then I'm having another brain fart. It says, Graham and Marshall, any word about increased or decreased Honda/Acura involvement in the various GT3 series around the world? He says, I was bummed to hear that the Hart team would not race at Petit Le Mans. I can tell you, Graham, that I know there's an announcement on Friday at Petit Le Mans that might be in this general sphere Mr. Kruper is asking about, but I don't know of anything involving increased or decreased efforts. Well, it's a customer-based car, so you'd hope to hear that more people are buying them. I don't know if that's going to be anything related to an announcement, but I do think that we might hear about the cars being even faster or maybe even more competitive.
Well, I think it's certainly we can say in the European side of things and beyond North America, which effectively is the home market for the car. Cars are built in the US, are they not, MP?
They are in Ohio.
Yeah, so certainly JAS, who are the Honda partner in Europe and effectively globally outside of North America, have had the cars in a variety of races. There was the fabulous Castrol-looking Castrol livery car that raced at Spa. We've had a car at the Suzuka 10 Hours. A car had its debut in the International GT Open, which, if you're not familiar with that is effectively a rival series to the Blancpain series in Europe. So we've seen a variety of the cars compete in a variety of different races, but they are looking for customers, and it's a very, very crowded marketplace in GT3 with some very well established organizations, manufacturer customer racing organizations. And when you're racing internationally or in continental terms, actually that customer support is pretty vital. There are lots of incentives that tend to go along with that, and they're not very content, the likes of AMG and Audi and Porsche and Ferrari for that matter, of letting their customers go. So It's, when you're coming in with a new product into that marketplace, it's tough to break through. And I think we will see more of the cars. Pretty car, it has to be said, and pretty darn effective, as has been seen in IMSA competition in particular. Once you've actually got a team that is able to use it to its best, but no, not breaking through in massive numbers yet. Would not be remotely surprised to see the odd single or two car effort breaking through in something like VLN, ADAC GT Masters, maybe into Blancpain in the future, but certainly no intel yet about where that might be coming from.
Yeah, and we have had four, I believe, a peak of four Acura NSX GT3s running in GTD with the CJ Wilson team thrown in for the Sebring and Watkins Glen NAEC rounds. Obviously, Hart has pulled out from Petite. We were fortunate to have them at Daytona, Sebring and Watkins. And then we have the two full-time Meyer Shank entries, one that is vying for the championship in GTD. So just looking at the numbers, it's an interesting makeup this year, Graham. If we're talking full-time, I mean, right now we only have, I guess there was one a Lexus that did not take the start at Elkhart Lake, but that was after a bad crash during the event that barred that car's participation. But we've only had 10 cars in GTD complete the full season. And so if we're just talking of those 10, and numbers-wise at least, drawing back to the original question here from Mr. Kruper, we have Paul Miller Racing leading the championship in their Lamborghini. Second place is an Acura with Shank. Third is a Mercedes-AMG with Riley. Fourth is Scuderia Corsa with a Ferrari. Fifth is a Lexus. Sixth is an Audi. Seventh is a Porsche. Eighth is a BMW. I mean, the top eight, unless my brain just farted, the top eight are all distinct brands. So we don't have a lot of doubling up of, or we don't, frankly, just don't have a lot of one manufacturer either towards the front or locking up the middle. I mean, you go Audi, Acura, Mercedes-AMG, Ferrari, Lexus, Audi, then you go to seventh with the Wright Motorsports Porsche, eighth right now with the Turner Motorsport BMW. We have to get to ninth, honestly, where we have the first duplicate, that being the second Shank Acura, and then 10th with the second Lexus. So the fact that we have two of anything in the series right now is full-time, is maybe a pretty good thing to say. I mean, we've got the two, quote, semi-factory Lexuses Lexusized. I've still never figured out how to say that correctly, but we've got those two there, and we've had the occasional two-car Porsche entry from Wright Motorsports. Beyond that, though, and, the occasional two-car Scuderia Corsa Ferrari effort, but really, those two Acura Meyer Shank Acuras have been among the only dual combo Noah's Ark type double effort in GTD. So numbers-wise, seems like they're doing okay here.
I'm going to grab a couple of questions that are around the kind of general theme of length of races. And it covers a bit of IMSA, it covers a bit of WEC, it covers a bit of VLMS as well. Got Cookie Monster, FL, and 4SGTE from the Reddit group, David Zitterbart and Matthew Hawkins from elsewhere. Cookie Monster talking, we've had this before about Road America, wants to see the race go into the twilight, 6+ hours. How can he persuade him to complete that singular life goal? What would you do to Elkhart Lake's round of the IMSA Championship? To him, 2 hours 40 minutes isn't enough to even see all parts of the track during the race. The last two IMSA races he attended there, finish came well before he got to a few great corners. That's that one. For SGTE, various points around, is the WEC the right or the wrong name? Should it be the World Sports Car Championship? Can't get terribly excited about that debate, I'll be honest with you, but I'll take your point. Also talks about WEC adopting an IMSA-like calendar, specific Enduro Cup within it, making half the races 500 kilometers or 3 hours maximum. The rest is a mix between 6 and 8 to 12 hours. David asking about an article I've wrote in Daily Sports Car with Gerard Neveu around the controversy that's been caused by the reduction of the Silverstone WEC race to 4 hours rather than 6, whilst other races, principally in this case, it's been a target for a number of people's ire, has been the Bahrain race to 8 hours. And the fact that Gerard was saying in this interview there'd been some confusion where they'd explained where the data had come from that informed that decision, that people had presumed it had come from the motorsport.com survey, whereas actually the principal data source had been some data mining that had been done at the track with fans, with the race hosts that collect this stuff either on pen and paper or in more cases on iPads. Right, my view. For me, it's exactly the same point in a different arena as we made earlier when we were talking about the sound of the cars. For me, variety is everything. I have not been a massive fan of so many of the WEC races being to the 6-hour length. And that principally is because I go to most of them, and that means that becomes, frankly, pretty samey. We go to the same circuits every year. We go to the same race formats for the most part every year. And with the exception of the very first race, which was, of course, the Sebring 12 hours, and the Le Mans 24 hours, generally speaking, everything else has been 6 hours. So I'm very happy to see them mix it up a bit. The choices they have made for that in terms of Silverstone going to 4 and Bahrain going to 8, let's wait and see. For me, and I'd be interested from your point of view here, MP, not as a journalist, but actually as someone who's been involved with running those cars, mixing up the format, particularly within a particular season, does tend to have some interesting effects on strategy choices. And you know what? People make mistakes. And I quite like it when people make mistakes, because the human aspect of things comes into this one. Is it can wrong step a team or a driver or a strategist? And I do like to actually mix it up. As for the choice about Silverstone, let me just clarify what it was that Gerard can say. And I'm not doing this because he's asked me to. It's because he answered the question that I asked him. And if it's been confusing in the way it's reported, then that's my fault, not his. What he was saying is, yes, absolutely. What he was referring to in the overall fan survey done by motorsport.com, God bless them and all the works, is that did indeed say that people would like to see a mix in format. It didn't say they would like to see a reduction in the length of the races. However, the specific surveys that are done year in, year out at the circuits, and it's certainly done at Silverstone, a number of people have now told me they have filled out that survey, did indeed show that a number of the people, I gather a fairly significant sample of those people, would actually like to see a marginal reduction in the length of that fixture for 2 or 3 reasons. We have had poor weather at times there, with a lot of families that go to that race. It's not the easiest part of the country necessarily to get to for people coming from the major conurbations. So it's not necessarily a surprise that people saw that. Very happy, by the way, that he did say that one of the things they are looking to trial at Silverstone next year is a significant exhibition off and on track of significant historic endurance racing cars. And that comes from the success that we're seeing with this new breed of historic, more modern historic races events. So we've had the Masters Historic Legends, we've had the Global Endurance Legends that debuted at the Le Mans Classic this year with something like 80 cars on display on and off track. If that comes, and by the way, Gerard made it very clear that he would like to see those exhibited by, for the most part, the drivers that drove them in period, I think that would be a massively popular addition to it. As for the point that was made around whether or not the WEC or WSC, as Forest GT would like to see it called, might support a championship and a championship, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's get the future structure of this thing back on track with LMP1 first. I do want to see more blue ribbon events in the FIWC. I think that would be a massive step forward. It's clearly what was intended with the Sebring race. We know that's been massively controversial with a number of people, but I think they are looking for the opportunity to start to think about events you could build into being something greater than 1/9 of the championship, and I think that would be a major step forward. Playing a little bit and seeing what works with race formats, actually, I think is a good step towards that. Will they get it right every time? No. I'd say this whichever the championship. Give them the respect for trying something different. Give them the respect for thinking about these things and playing with it, because a number of times when they have tried something a little bit different, it has come out to be better in the long run. So, I am a fan of making sure that race organisers, race promoters are given a little bit of leeway. It doesn't always work. I've been very critical of some of these things, principally that, those of you that listen in regularly will know I'm not a massive fan of some of the changes that have been made at Le Mans and at Spa in the 24-hour races about the way in which strategy has been stripped out. That's a mistake. But you know what? You've got to give something a chance sometimes to see whether or not it flies or it doesn't. I tend to think that the 4-hour race format might well actually be fine at Silverstone. You can get around the track in that particular time. Road America, as you guys know, I've not been before, ever. If they have a 6-hour race there, might be enough to get me on the plane. I like that idea. And if they were going to play with the NAEC and maybe add another round to it, I think they could do far worse, MP. What do you think?
I completely agree. And I guess that's boring. I should be saying, Graham, you idiot. Everything you've just said is the worst possible thing in the world. No, I'm in agreement on this one. Maybe that's why I like you. Let's do this. And for the first time, I'm not joking and saying, well, I won't say we've got 20 minutes to go, but I will say we're getting close to 2 hours in, so let's try and wind down a wee bit. I'm going to grab a couple here from the fun and or personal and or pithy, and
Excellent.
Then dive back and grab a couple that are on the prototype front. Let me go with just this one. Last week, on the Week in IndyCar, someone asked about my dream memorabilia, and I happened to mention that I already had it, and it was this just beautiful, incredible card that Dan Gurney sent me, thanking me for an article I'd written that I'd interviewed him for, and how that is just, how do you top getting a personal letter thanking you from your hero? Ian Gent has said, piggybacking off of that, Graham, what is your dream piece of sports car memorabilia? And he also has mentioned you aren't allowed to choose the 1995 Harrods McLaren F1 car.
Damn. I got one of my dream pieces of memorabilia. It's not really memorabilia so much as it's a book. I'm quite a fan of racing books. And it was for my 50th birthday, and it came my way from my good friend, colleague, and business partner, Dave Lord. And it came to him via his late and much lamented friend, who passed away many years ago, very early, with the awfulness of his cancer. My very first racing hero was Ronnie Peterson. And Ronnie ghosted a book, and I'm now the very proud owner of a copy of that book signed by Ronnie Peterson.
Wow.
And that, to me, is just all sorts of awesome. I've got all sorts of crap. That's people. I mean, but one of the things that I've got somewhere, I'm not quite sure exactly where it is, but I'll know exactly what it is when I see it. It's a piece of polystyrene. It's a piece of polystyrene that's when I was at the British Grand Prix with my then very young son. We were standing at the complex just beyond Bridge Corner when Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher came together and went backwards through the corner markers. And that picture was in all the national newspapers, and the following morning we could see ourselves pointing in the direction of two cars disappearing up an escape road. And I've got a couple of pieces of that polystyrene with the rubber on as it was run over by Damon Hill's Williams going backwards. That's there as a little bit of bizarreness. You know what? It's memories, isn't it? It's any little memory. I'm a firm fan of keeping little bits of memory. More or less every media lanyard I've ever had is either in a box in my office or in two places mounted on display in the office, just down from where I'm standing at the moment in the house. And every single one of them has got some form of memory, whether or not it's the race, the people, the event, the weather, the perfectly dreadful catering, something. And I think that's what it's all about, isn't it? Isn't it all about actually looking back and thinking what great times they were? And memorabilia, I saw what was delivered to you. Was it 2 weeks ago, MP? You got a box.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm also actually remiss, Graham, and I know a couple of our listeners have written in. It was great to hear that you were able to save the Ronnie Peterson book, but definitely remiss in expressing our sorrow for learning of the fire that broke out in the Goodwin library. We know that you were very upset. There were at least 3 or 4 you'd yet to color, so we know that all losing those books. Definitely
kept
the low point. Yes,
so kept within the lines. But
yeah, if you have some crayons, you might be able to send, or any other racing coloring books. We know Graham's trying to build the library back up, so any help there would be greatly appreciated. I just stole that from Robin Miller, who told that story last week of I think it was Gordon Johncock at a roast of A.J. Foyt, maybe, or Johnny Rutherford, and that one brought the house down, talking about how sad he was to hear about A.J. and the A.J. Foyt library burning to the ground, and he knows how much he was looking forward to still coloring 3 or 4 of the books he'd yet to get to. But anyways, I'll just throw in, I guess, Ian, and again, I apologize if I've mentioned this in previous podcasts, but I have a couple of pieces of sports car memorabilia that are dear to me. I've paid for 2 out of the 3 I'm about to mention. 2 happen to be pieces of rear body work from Nissan GTP cars, and these would be I guess we would call them the large end plates to the rear wings that were mounted within the rear body work. Obviously, there was a point in GTP, especially in the early 90s, where the rear wings kind of sprouted out and upwards into their own piece of real estate. But back for the pieces that I have, they were actually integral in the rear bodywork that came off the car. So these would be the large pieces that fitted to the engine cover on the sides right behind the wheels. And I believe both are autographed by young Mr. Jeff Brabham. The other one that I have, which was an opportunistic find that I could not bend down and pick up, was, I believe, following the 2011 24 Hours of Le Mans, with Alan McNish's hellacious crash on the downhill portion of the Dunlop curves. And if I'm getting the year wrong, whether it was 2011, 2012, it blurs a little bit for me. But was just the top side of the hill when that crash happened. And obviously there was Audi R18 strewn all over. And walked down the hill after. There's obviously a huge amount of debris to clean up. And while they were cleaning it up, how's this? Did see that there were a number of photographers who were reaching down, grabbing bits of strewn R18 parts, and I think at that point the corner marshals grabbed those parts back and just set everybody out, and I could not disagree with that. Walked down the hill, I think got to Tete Rouge maybe, and then walked back probably an hour later. It might have been 2 hours later. Long story short, walking back up the hill near the crash site, just down below it, maybe about 100 feet below, looked down and saw this small, I don't know, slightly bigger than maybe somewhere between a golf ball and tennis ball size of
Alan's bigger than that
bodywork. Yes, and it was a little piece of the hashtag front nose.
Oh wow!
It was a piece of the splitter off of Alan's crashed R18, and admittedly, it was the only little piece of debris that I saw. So not only did they do an excellent job of truly cleaning up the entire crash site, but I don't know why it was missed. I was just I guess when I tend to walk trackside, I notice that I look down a lot. Like I just kind of, I guess that's where my head rests more than it should. I should probably be looking up, considering I'm walking through an accident site where Ann Prophet and her dog was almost killed. So I should have been looking up and being a smart monkey. Instead, I wasn't, and just happened to see this little shiny silver thing, or grayish silver thing, and was like, what the heck is that? Picked it up and like, oh. And anyways, just stuffed it in my pocket, and off we go. And it's actually sitting somewhere on a bookshelf, hidden away. But yeah, that's the other thing. And I wouldn't say prized. I mean, it's not as if you're like, hey, I got a piece of a $1 zillion race car that was destroyed. But just one of those happened to be in that place and see that one remaining item and be like, well, it's only going to get washed away or forgotten at this point. And so, yeah, so maybe prized is the wrong way to put it, but unique, I would say for sure. I've yet to ask Alan McNish to sign it, though. There's something that tells me that might be a little bit too much.
Oh, he's signed a piece of broken bodywork. It wasn't his accident, in fairness. I've got a sizable chunk of a Toyota GT1 on the display case in the office, but together with a piece of Golf Lola Aston Martin that Thomas Enger reduced to its component parts and less on its very first flying lap, wrote the car off. But no, I have to say, Alan is known for a lot of things. Excellent colour commentator nowadays, and obviously fabulous race driver. But there is nobody, and I mean absolutely nobody, in world motorsport who is better able to reduce a car to its component parts when he crashes. He does it properly.
His
okay?
black and white commentary also underrated, definitely underrated. All right.
Right then, what else have we got here?
I'll grab another one here from, I believe this is from our Reddit friends, and this would be Trewavosaurus, I believe. His real name is his real name. He doesn't want anybody to know it. His real name is Albert. Albert, yes. See, Albert Saurus. Yes, I think that's the real name here. Some backstory. I've recently been extremely fortunate with a career change starting last week, exposing me to Grand Prix winners and endurance sports cars on a daily basis where I work. That's a
very odd job.
Well,
that's a really strange job.
I'm glad to hear that in the way that was written, it could have gone badly. Career change where I am constantly having Grand Prix winners and endurance sports cars exposed to me, or exposing themselves to him. So good to hear. To start, I couldn't take my eyes off them, but have since got a little bit, quote, desensitized to them unless there's something new to see. Quite an interesting realization. So, have either of you noticed this due to your high exposure to the sport through different paths, being desensitized to it, whether it be for the cars, drivers, or engineers? Or is there still a kid in a candy shop mentality for most events in every race, or has it worn off over time? And let's go with you. Where do you fall on this?
Well, it references the WC Circuit Safari again here, and actually that's a good reference point, because the reason that was so exciting, because I'd never done it before. I'd read about it for decades, and I'd never done it before, and it was very exciting indeed to realise that we're going to be able to do that with the WC. Are you desensitized? I'd love to say no, but of course it's your working environment, and actually because you've got to do what you've got to do, in long hours and in come rain come shine, at times you're sometimes not aware there are cars on track. I'm not saying that when I'm in the TV booth, that would be ridiculous.
That'd be silly.
Yeah, but the answer is there are certain things that never get old, ever get old. The access that we get never gets old. I never, ever forget what a privileged position that is. And it's my view that absolutely anybody involved with any race series should make darn sure that they make it their stated aim every day to make sure that they've got the opportunity to give somebody a little bit of access, a little bit of a little bit of excellence in their day. Then that's what they should do. But I think, of course, you do get desensitized to it to a degree. I am one of those people that if I'm not necessarily working back to back, I'd be very happy sitting in a grandstand or sitting trackside and watching and listening to race cars all day long. I've sometimes sometimes done that when I'm not working. But then when you're actually there and working and going through that cycle of race reporting, session reporting, gathering comment from the pits, in and out of tech rehearsals for TV, etc., which is my working day, then of course at times you can have cars going out there. It might be a driver doing the lap of his life, and you might just not notice it. So yes, you can get desensitized to it, but only because that is your natural working environment. When you actually step away from that cycle, and particularly when you go down into the paddock or into the garages, I generally don't tend to be in pit lane ever during a track session. I've got no purpose being there, so I don't get in the way. Then the answer there is that gets to be a bit more real, and that's when the part that really appeals to me, which is the people. It is the people that actually the thing that for me nowadays is the particularly special part of it. And there are some people who are just an absolute joy to spend time with. Marshall Pruett is one of them. There was never a dull moment. Never. Yeah, I'm sorry. But there are people you genuinely look forward to spending time with because they have things to say. They have opinions. They have news. They have insights. And that side never gets old. Never gets old. There are certain places and certain times when I look forward to being there. The first walk down the pit lane at Le Mans every year is always very special. Going to certain tracks and certain parts of those tracks is always very special. The paddock in the Nürburgring 24 Hours is a very special place. And I've never found that getting old or boring, no matter how utterly shattered you might be after 22, 23, 30 hours of work. It's still something that wakes you up to go and see it, hear it, smell it. It doesn't get old, but yeah, inevitably there are elements of it where you are just dog tired, and I think that's like any other job. But you never forget how privileged a position this is. And I think I've said again before on the show that, when we've had those moments where, some of the youngsters who've come through our doors in the past, that there will inevitably that point where there's been frustration, it's not gone their way, and you sometimes have to take them to one side and say, it could be worse, you could be down a coal mine. Is the honest answer. And by the way, if you don't shut up, you will be down a coal mine. But there are those joyous moments, MP, and I'm sure you've had thousands of them. I certainly have, where you suddenly realise. Somebody asked me this question fairly recently, and the answer I gave was, it's this simple. I take pleasure in odd things at times. For me, one of the things that just gives me an inner joy is that Jan Lammers knows who I am. Stephen Kilby said this to me a month or two ago, rather, that circumstances offer themselves, that Stephen wanted to write about a charity event where Derek Bell had actually done wing walking. And Stephen asked whether or not we could do a piece to help that fundraising effort. Of course we can. And that meant that Stephen had to contact Derek. Derek called him, and Derek knew he was. Now, it's that's the level at which my insides just turn cartwheels. I just think that's just a fantastic thing. That's privilege, as far as I'm concerned. I'd far rather have that privilege than some of the silver spoon nonsense that goes on in other areas of society, because that, for me, that's just, it feeds my passion for what makes what I do something I really love to do. And, most people in the world are not lucky enough 9 to 5 or however long you guys work out there with your various careers to do something you're passionate about all day, every day. I'm passionate about what I do all the time. Sometimes I hide it really, really well.
Mr. Albert Soros, I hate to offer this as a response, but because I hate this response more than anything, my answer is yes and no. And maybe I can add a little bit of context so it's less frustrating, at least to me. Yes, there's absolutely a bit of desensitization from my end in comparison maybe to a fan of racing. And that's because since I was, well, shoot, I mean, if we really want to go back, since the age of before I could remember, race car drivers have been my father's best friend, one of our family's best friends, who I actually, the first person I started working for in pro racing at the age of 15 or 16 in the SCCA Super V series. So pretty much my entire life, a race car driver. My dad was also the engine builder and built his own race cars and whatnot. That's been normal. And then in my mid-teens, working with professional race car drivers and amateurs, good, bad, and everywhere in between, that's been completely normal. And then that evolved into being a engineer and a team manager, as in bigger series and so on. And so I'd say from one end, there's maybe never been a desensitization. Maybe, I guess I'm correcting myself. There's never been that natural hero worship, because that's been, it's been Dad, or Rick Sturza, his best friend and business partner, or Mike McHugh, the family friend in Super V, or this guy or that guy. That's just, it's honestly, while they're awesome and amazing people, you'd have to say it's probably no different than the person sitting across from you at the cubicle at wherever you work, or in whatever job you do, where you go, oh, well, that's like family, or that's normal to me.
It's a social circle, isn't it? It's a social circle, and that it doesn't belittle the achievements and the ambition and the efforts. It is simply just something that's in your orbit, and it's a strange thing, actually, to be asked the question and suddenly take a step away from it and think, actually, that's a really good question, but this is the way I feel about it.
And then there's the flip side to that. And this isn't name checking or any of that stuff. I'm just, again, sharing because the question's asked. James Hinchcliffe shot me a text last week wanting to get some insight on something. And I replied with this, and he replied with that, and we went back and forth for a good while about this thing. This driver called and asked a question about whatever. And those things are normal too. And to those who are fans of the sport, many of these folks, if not all of these folks, are heroes, and they should be. They should absolutely be regarded as that. Working with them every day, or just having that kind of long-term familiar relationship, many, fortunately, that are, become tight bonds or personal friends, I actually find myself having to remind myself of how special they are, because that familiarity can sometimes have a negative effect. James Hinchcliffe, who is an amazing person, just empathy like you wouldn't believe, a heart the size of the moon, just truly an excellent person, is also a phenomenal race car driver. And I'll throw Scott Dixon in there. He was one of our guests last week on the Weekend IndyCar, a couple days after he won his 5th IndyCar championship. I have the good fortune to be pretty close with Dix. And sometimes I have to remind myself that in a conversation that is either public or meant for a podcast or an interview, to have to step back from that and be a little bit separate, because otherwise it's just two people talking and not necessarily good content or product that someone might actually want to look at or listen to. And so that's why I say yes and no, because there are situations where you say, God, it feels like I talk to this guy every other day. And so to me, they are that familiar, that close, and so their unique attributes maybe become less extraordinary, but then I do have to step back and go, okay, idiot, whether you know the person well or you don't, they're still pretty darn remarkable, and you need to appreciate that. And then there's the third tier, like you've mentioned, with a Derek Bell. And that's the side that I will say, probably of all the input I could give on this, that's the side that will never make sense. I've said this before. when the late Dan Gurney would call. My wife and I could be sitting on the couch, and his name would pop up on my phone, and she knows how much Dan means to me and meant to me. I'd see that light up, and I'd look at her and just kind of raise my hands in kind of that questioning look, like, what in the world is happening? How did this godlike person to me decide, for whatever reason, to call or to send an email or whatever? And it's that Derek Bell type thing, where Derek and I are super friendly. I love the guy. We've spoken hours upon hours, done all kinds of things and stories and podcasts and you name it. And I guarantee you that when I see him in 2 days' time at Rensport, despite all that familiarity, there's still going to be that is Derek Bell. Oh my God, that is Derek Bell. And at least for me, I have to suppress it a bit, because otherwise it gets hard to do your job. And being professional, that's maybe the thing I've come to learn, Graham. And it's treating yourself like an alien among humans. With some of these drivers who many of us will regard as legends, heroes, the greatest of the greats, or, a Norbert Singer from Porsche who I'm going to sit down with for a little while, or you name it. I have to do my best to put myself in the mindset of I am an alien presented in human form, and I need to not tip them off that I'm not one of them, that I'm actually, I've snuck in, and I am operating among them. Please do not say any weird words or make any bleepity bleep sounds or let the antennas peek out from my cap or the tail show. Whatever it is, don't let these people know that I'm not one of them, because that's when things get weird. And yet, the 21st century has presented us with an irregular, but, it's happened more than once to me, an irregular opportunity to just have that almost laugh out loud moment. And I can tell you one of them that happened 2 or 3 years ago, and it's Twitter. And I remember sitting there tapping away at some, I don't know, probably British GT news story. Up pops a little alert. Emerson Fittipaldi is following you. Yeah. It's just one of those crazy things. And so I just come back to, and so maybe I'll just close on this, because I don't know, I find it amusing to talk about it. Then you have maybe the fourth angle, which I just realized, and that is, let's see. So going on who I expect to see this weekend at Rensport, I believe Nick Tandy will be there. I think he's going to be there. I'll be surprised if he isn't, but Nick Tandy will be there. And the first thing when I see Tandy every time is just say something, horrifically offensive to him.
Absolutely.
Right?
It's got the face for it.
And, you don't do this in and around other folks, but you just walk up and just say, hey, you bleepity, bleepity, bleep, and just lay into him as hard as you can. And I expect, and I'm disappointed, I will be disappointed if I don't get something equally, or if not more hostile back.
Oh, yeah.
But I mention that because, that it's frickin' Nick. I mean, look, if you don't bust his balls, that's not the way things work.
There's no point in turning up if you don't do that.
But then you step back and realize that, I don't know, I'm sure there are plenty today who idolize him, as they should. Oh my goodness, one of the world's greatest drivers, period. But 20 years from now, 30 years from now, when he is rocking up to the Rensport Reunion 30 or whatever it is, bald, gray-haired, whatever it is, with a cane, I don't know, but when he shows up 20, 30, 40 years from now, looking exactly, playing the part of that aging veteran Porsche driver who is beloved, renowned Le Mans winner and champion of this, and when those decades in the future, Nick Tandy is viewed in that same iconic way as the Vic Elfords, the Elliott Forbes Robinsons, the Hobbs, name some of the other big legends that are in their 60s and 70s. Nick's going to rock up to Rennsport decades in the future, and to just about everybody there, he is going to be, oh my God, that is Nick Tandy. I am in the shadow of greatness. And if I don't walk up and say, you bleepity cockeyed such and such, there'll be something wrong. So that's the other thing. So today's folks, today's future legends, they'll be revered however they are duly revered in the future, Graham. I just know that these relationships now, you sure as heck don't give them credit for anything. If anything, you try and break them down a little bit, and they do the same to you. Pruett, do they still allow you to write stories? Oh my God, the police haven't intervened yet? I mean, that's what it should be.
You're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. I mean, the lack of respect, the lack of... Do you not see the opportunity? Remember this, when Nick Tandy is in the same room as you, okay, you can always go back to the team bus and take his wallet.
That's a good idea. We're going to rob him blind. So I love it. All right. Well, where shall we head for a couple of questions?
I know couple of finals,
some prototypey stuff, but why don't you grab a couple you're keen on?
Well, let's do that. Alex Eichmiller says, if Core happens to win the championship in LMP2 car, do you think that helps or hurts the decision to split the prototype class? Do you think anyone would change their opinion of the decision? Well, that's pertinent, isn't it, MP, from the story that you and I have been working on in the last 24 hours? Because, number one, I think it would be wonderful. I think it would be fantastic for the good men and women of Core Autosports. I think it might prick the bubble a little bit of a couple of the DPI teams, for that matter. But I think you're going to find that there might be a few more LMP2 cars next year that at the moment people reckon there might be. Had a long chat with a couple of people at Spa-Francorchamps over the weekend, and we know, of course, there's the three remaining teams that look like continuing, PR1 Matterson, the Performance Tech team and Core, but there is further interest out there, and further interest out there from outside the current realms of P2 level prototype racers within potentially the LMP3 community in the United States and the single-seater community. And watch this space, because I can guarantee you that as soon as that story hits, there will be other journalistic entities that will be going through thinking, it could be them, could be them, could be them. And there'll be a peppering of phone calls going up. So I would guess, I'd give it, what do you think, 3 days, MP, before someone comes back with scoop exclusive?
Breaking exclusive scoop.
But the good news is that there is actually the potential here for expansion of the prototype grid in P2. And no matter what is happening, and another excellent story from you today, MP, with the potential for what might happen with ESM moving forward, is if you do get the level of expansion that we think there might be, and we're talking here not 3, but probably 5, possibly as many as 7 near full-time cars in LMP2. My guess is close to 5, but you're getting into a pretty high teens number there in the combined prototype grid, and with potential for the difference in pace between the DPIs and the P2s, you can have these very capable Gibson engine cars, often in the hands of very, very capable drivers. And all of a sudden, for the DPIs, traffic is going to take on a different meaning, and that could be big fun.
Well, we are going to close our big fun with 3 questions stacked up from James Hewitt, Ed Joris, and we will close with Keith Gibson. Let me grab James's to start. He said, is there any idea of where the next set of LMP2 regulations will go? Are the ACO looking to get more chassis manufacturers in because of the errant issues with the Multimatic stock P2 chassis, as in the one without Mazda updates and changes? That, I think, would be more of your world, sir, knowing that, yes, car, whatever the heck it ends up being called, on the P1-ish front, we seem to think we know where that might be headed. Haven't heard much on what the ACO and WEC are thinking on the P2 side. Anything we can share?
Okay, well, a couple of bits and pieces to chuck into the mix here. We know that obviously at the moment there's still the debate around the relative dominance of the Orica chassis. We know as well that there's still conversations about what might happen to deal with that, whether or not that is a move to liberalise that marketplace, whether or not it means BOPing the dominant chassis. There's going to be some further controversy on that one. However, we're not a million miles away from where the issue of the next phase of licenses, effectively for P2 manufacturers, is going to have to be gripped. It would be fair to say, I think, Orica, Ligier, Dallara would be a shoe-in unless their marketplace collapses, which doesn't look like being the case. Multimatic is a fair point, but they have that DPI customer, but it's fair to say a zero customer car count active at the moment. Beyond that, who else would be directly interested? Well, for sure, Ginetta would be interested if their P1 program can actually get the momentum that I think it deserves. I think they've been very unlucky as a manufacturer in terms of what's happened with the commercial aspects of that program, and equally well, they've already been selected as a P3 manufacturer again, one of the 4 that's been selected there. The other one I think that's worth looking at is Norma. They've come up with a very capable LMP3 chassis. It's a carbon tub, of course. There's a new organisation now in charge of that program, the Decane Engineering side, a very capable organisation, proven ability, by the way, to run a P2 race program. They've been going great guns in their first season in the ELMS with their Orica program. So immediately there, if you were going to stick with those 4 chassis, then you've got a problem on your hands, because you've got the potential for there to be 6 people bidding for potentially 4 licenses. Might there be a spanner in the works with what happens with the next phase of DPI? There might be. That's one to think about. Could there be something grandfathered there for the existing Multimatic chassis? Might well be. Might they go for more than 4? They might. The marketplace is still expanding. I mean, if you imagine at the moment, the Gibson engine is actually a great yardstick for that. Initially, I think the initial production batch for that was 30. These are engines in circulation, sold by the hour, etc. Then they go back in for rebuild, etc. Now 50. In terms of cars that are going to be active in that marketplace, well, the numbers make for a pretty interesting reading. If we accept that maybe it's 5 or 6 in the United States, it's somewhere around 16 to 18, probably closer to 20 in the European Le Mans Series next year. So you're already in the mid-20s. Add in half a dozen or more from the FIWEC, and you're over 30 against an engine marketplace that has 50. They're going to need some more engines if we get beyond that. And that's without, by the way, the chassis that are involved in the DPI marketplace, of which I think there are 10, 12 if you include the 2 Ligier Nissans. There's a lot of chassis out there for such a capable capable platform, and I think that's going to be an interesting challenge. Somebody, I suspect, is going to be disappointed. Who is that going to be? Well, last time the disappointed party was Ginetta. Ginetta did go for it, didn't get it. It's believed that they were edged out by Dallara on the commercial side of things. I think it's going to be an interesting contest this time. What you've got, think it through like this. You have Ligier at the moment with a strong LMP3 marketplace, reasonably strong, but suffering LMP2 marketplace. Orica with an LMP1 product, an LMP2 product where they dominate, and of course have got the contract for all of the powertrains in LMP3. They build all of those Nissan X-Track powertrains. Dallara have an LMP1 product, have an LMP2, do not have an LMP3. Ginetta are rather the odd ones out, because they've got an LMP3 an LMP1 and nothing in between, and that gives them a problem in terms of customer conversion and a ladder. And then you've got the oddities, Ades in LMP3, Norma in LMP3, and a couple of the minnows in LMP1 that don't have another product in the game. For me, it's probably going to be between the Ginetta and Norma if they go for it. I think Multimatic need to show that they're going to be serious about a customer car if they're going to go for it again.
If there's one thing I'm keen on the Norma, it's one of very few race cars where you don't have to ask what gender it applies to. We know for sure that would be the feminine, not the masculine. All right, let's move to Ed Joris, the penultimate question for this week's episode. It says, are there going to be too many Cadillacs in DPI for its own good next season? Will the new Cadillac teams be behind the 8-ball, since Wayne Taylor Racing and Action Express Racing will have 2 years of setup info that the new teams won't have? Let's start with the last question first. Yes, and of course, that would be the same for anything. If I'm entering something where people have been using the same tool competitively for a couple of years, of course they're going to be ahead of me because they've been doing it longer and have amassed more information. Where, Ed, that can be shortened a bit is Dallara, I believe, as I wrote, and I think you wrote, and others might have written, Graham. Dallara was a big factor in Wayne Taylor Racing's holy cow dominant 2017 DPI championship winning season, and that's because they opted in for Dallara's additional engineering and technical support package to go along with whatever they learned on their own, while Action Express Racing did not. And it took AXR roughly half the season to get up to speed, to learn all the ins and outs of the car on their own, and then they came on incredibly strong. They had a very, very powerful second half of the season, but Wayne Taylor Racing, with Dallara there in lockstep from the beginning, really eked out too big of an advantage during the first half of 2017 for that to be overcome. If Juncos, if JDC Miller / Gainsco opt into that Dallara package, I would say that they are going to be in much better stead and should be more competitive from the outset. From the first question, though, are there going to be too many Cadillacs in DPI for its own good? I don't know if I can find an angle where that fits, for me at least, Ed. I do have a commentary. I don't even know if it's not really a commentary. It's just an expression story that I started a couple weeks ago, and I'll try and get it done, posted before Petit Le Mans. But that's in referring to Cadillac's DPI VR, Graham, as the final thing we've been asking for, or I should say finally what I've been asking for so long, and that is the modern equivalent of the Porsche 962. Would a manufacturer make a readily available, customer purchasable, race-winning capable prototype? Would they actually make that happen? And there's been a fair amount of back and forth written about this. I love reading some of racers' comments about this topic. Cadillac said at the outset of 2017 to one reporter that, no, we are definitely open to customer cars, and you name it. And look, it's their freedom to say whatever they choose. When you go and speak with the folks who've spoken with them who wanted to gain access to those cars and who are told, no, it ain't happening, you have a disconnect in words. Basically, you have platitudes being offered. You have things being said that on the surface look great, Graham, but are not being met with reality behind the scenes. Similar situation coming into this season in 2018. Oh yeah, you bet. You bet. And no. A lot of those teams that wanted to buy Cadillac have been or were running Ligiers, Orecas, you name it, and taking nothing away from the Spec P2 constructors. If Cadillacs were available, or Mazdas, or the Nissans, or even the Acuras were available for purchase this season, I'm fairly confident in saying every single P2 entrant this year would be in a DPI. Most of the teams that have bought the WEC P2s have told me they had the funds to be able to buy a Cadillac. Not inexpensive, but they were capable of doing it. For whatever reason, despite public statements that you bet, come on up, would love to sell it to you, sure as heck didn't happen. Those folks who were intent on coming in did so by having to buy WEC P2s. After 2 years, though, something has changed. And that is what I love. That is what I think is just phenomenal for IMSA and their DPI category. Granted, Acura still isn't going to sell their ARX-05 Graham. I believe there's a minimum 2-year. I've heard it might be 3, but at least minimum 2-year exclusive with Team Penske. Mazda has said in no uncertain terms they are not ready to sell their RT24Ps for at least another season, so they'll compete through 2019 at least as a pure factory team, no customer cars. Have had a change though with the Nissan on-road DPI. Scott Sharp telling us, Ligier also stating in press announcements that, hey, if you want one, the 2-year exclusivity is now up, is not been renewed with ESM. Come and get them. So I hope that while most of what we've read so far, Ed, is there will be as many as 7 Cadillac DPI VRs on the grid at some races next year. I'm hoping that we hear, no matter what's going on with ESM and trying to replace Tequila Patron as their primary sponsor and whatever their car count ends up being, I hope we hear of at least one additional Nissan let's just say non-ESM Nissan DPI being fielded by someone, because then it would not be simply growth within the Cadillac family, but also with Nissan. And that, to me, tell me if you agree, Graham, that might actually be the best indicator of health in the DPI ranks. That instead of everybody going to the championship-winning, defending champion model, we have some folks actually looking into one of the other models. That's Juan Sebring this year, Juan Laguna Seca, last year Juan Petit Le Mans, another chassis that has done a fair amount, I guess the second most successful DPI chassis since the Formula launched.
I completely agree, and it is it's that magic moment, isn't it, when you can find a formula that is not only competitive, but is accessible in terms of the finances that apply to it. And we know, and actually the final question, and I think actually I'll say this before we read it, it's expressed in one of the more intelligent ways I've seen this debate expressed, is looking to investigate exactly why we've got that division here between the DPI formula and car, the new LMP1 hypercar idea. And there's a couple of perfectly sane and simple reasons behind that. But yeah, if you can get to the stage where you've got this opportunity for, you expressed it perfectly, a 21st century Porsche 962, and in particular, if you've got the opportunity for choice in that marketplace, because one of the weaknesses that we tend to forget now with our rose-colored spectacles, certainly in the European and global product, was there probably were just a few too many of those Porsches against not many of much else. And if actually you could get to the stage where there was, a goodly number of Cadillacs, but I think you described it perfectly as a 21st century Porsche 962. But what would be even better, MP, is if it wasn't just a Porsche 962. If, as well as that, we had a Jaguar XJR12 in the manner of a DPI Nissan and something else. If actually what you got was a depth of numbers, that depth of numbers, by the way, doesn't need to be much more than 3. That I think would be something truly spectacular.
Completely agree. Mate, why don't you take our final question for the Week in Sports Cars presented by Cooper Tires, recorded here on a fine September 25th.
It comes from Keith Gibson. Is the IMSA DPI idea too cheap for the WEC? If manufacturers could buy a chassis, drop an engine in, do aero to look like a production theme for a fraction of the cost of an LMP1 and GT Pro, would the WEC become too unbalanced towards prototypes and manufacturers move away from GT cars? Do the WEC need to price out the smaller manufacturers in order to keep the GT fields healthy? That's a healthily different way of looking at it. Let me, just really
Great
briefly.
Question, Keith. Great
it is
question.
A really good question. why is it that we've got this division? Why is it that the WEC is going down a road that doesn't accord with what a lot of people regard as being a truly sensible way forward with DPI? First things first, you need to look at recent history. The WEC and the ACO would say that they believe they've been caught out by going too far down one road on the technology front and not having direct relevance to the product of their main manufacturer customers. That's why the styling queue aspect comes in with the hypercar formula. It's also why they want to retain the hybrid aspect to the technology. They need that electrification aspect, they believe, in order to be truly relevant in the modern marketplace. The second part of it is to do with this business around budget. There is massive concentration going on at the moment to drive down the potential upper level of the new LMP1 formula, and for two reasons. One is because, of course, it expands the potential number of manufacturers that will come, because obviously you're not just looking to convert the likes of Toyota, you're looking to get people onto the wagon of endurance racing, some of them potentially for the first time, and certainly some for the first time in a long period of time. The second thing, and this is equally important in a cold and cynical world, is you want these organizations to be sufficiently committed to these programs that they are prepared and empowered to activate those programs. What that means, marketing terminology, is that you're spending money to advertise, to publicize. That means you're spending money trackside, you're spending money on gantries, you're spending money on TV ads, you're spending money in the paddock, you're spending money that is actually helping to keep the business of racing, and in this case the business of the WEC, the ACO, the Le Mans 24 Hours, in the case of DPI with IMSA, keeping that ball rolling. What they're trying to do is to put together a package that is sustainable over a longer period of time than the current program has been. And what that means is you're looking to put in a formula where there's limited scope for development, which means limited escalation in terms of cost, which also means you get more than one shot at this. What do I mean by that? At the moment, the huge pressure is time. The clock is ticking to the point at Silverstone in September 2020 when these cars are due to race for the first time. That is not a lot of time to go. It feels a bit like a kind of endurance racing Brexit, to be honest with you. Anybody listening in from the UK will know exactly what I'm talking about with that one. So the time constraint is the key. And were we in a position where we're talking about launching LMP1H, it would be disastrous if people miss that starting gun. With a formula that actually allows people to have something with a little less development potential, that's got a couple more corners around it, actually it's not the end of the world if, for the sake of arguing, you've got 4 manufacturers interested and 3 of them make the deadline and the 4th doesn't, because it shouldn't be as difficult as it has been before to get on that moving platform a year late. That's the upside. The downside is launching anything new into a cold and cynical marketplace is always a risk. DPI has worked. Thus far, it has worked. There's no doubt about that. It's not what the ACO wanted. They have actually, if you listen to them, some reasonably good reasons for saying so. They want to be in control of their own destiny in exactly the same way as IMSA want to be in control of theirs. Unfortunately, they are mutually exclusive aims and objectives there. If you ask Gerard Deveau, if you ask Pierre Fillon, if you ask any of the guys involved in the organisation of the WEC, they will say, point me in the direction of a current or aspirant DPI manufacturer that wants to come and do the WEC, not the Le Mans 24 Hours, the WEC. And that, whether you like it or not, from the point of view of their commercial interest, is the correct point to be making. It may not be the point you want to hear. It may be that you might be in the camp that says the WEC is something that could be sacrificed at the altar of getting it right in terms of the Le Mans 24 Hours. They're the guys in charge. They're the guys who have to justify it. That's their point, and it is a telling point, and it's absolutely no different whatsoever than the point that was made by IMSA in bringing forward DPI in the first place. It's work for their product.
Keith, I'll just add one bit to this, and it's coming off of your brilliant opening sentence in the question, is the IMSA DPI idea too cheap for the WEC? That landed with me in a certain way where I think it describes differing business models for the two sanctioning bodies. If we think of IMSA, and we also think of the WEC/ACO, both rely on investments from all manufacturers to make their series work. With IMSA being a domestic series, no international travel, the asking prices for official manufacturer affiliation, that's required for any, whether it's GTs to prototypes, the auto manufacturer associated must spend money. Again, we've heard rough numbers that it's in the $1 million range per year. It might not be a straight check that's written for that amount. Some of it could be a portion for marketing activation, but every manufacturer must commit. And there's some exceptions where the Nissan thing, for example, with ESM, Nissan is not a true manufacturer. The team has facilitated this, so they've come up with a workaround on that. But if we think of what IMSA needs per year to cover travel and cover this and that, a lot of it, I don't want to say all, because there's obviously entry fees from the teams, etc., but if we think of how the two endurance organizations work, let's just call it the European side and the American side, the need and the ask is much smaller over here. Every manufacturer will whinge about how much they're being asked to spend, but I know for a fact that it's a tolerable amount by comparison. You flip over to the WEC, you look at the European angle, which is a globe-trotting endurance series. It's a totally different need, Keith, and that's where I think you're really onto something here about this IMSA DPI model not necessarily fitting. Of all the things that have hurt the ACO and FIA the most, it is Audi and their zillion dollars of activation per year that they were spending going away. It's Porsche. Obviously, they're still involved in the GTE side, but the big, showy, spendy, holy cow, over-the-top effort with their LMP1 program, that kind of investment into the series, financial outlay just on the activation side that went into the series on top of their own spends, those have been dialed back. You have a case where we have this big globe-trotting series. They need money coming in from the paddock to help facilitate that. LMP1 Hybrid really was, I believe, the biggest contributor to that because the budget's involved. Now, two of the three pillars of those biggest spenders are not really doing. One's gone altogether. The other one's only in GT. And Toyota, from the outside, has, at least from what I've seen, doesn't appear to be spending wildly on activation. Not saying they aren't activating, just saying I'm not seeing grand excess in doing that. So I think you're onto something here, Keith. I think that for what the ACO needs from an income level, I think there is value not only to separate manufacturers, to keep them out of, put the prototype number high enough so that you aren't robbing from the GT fields, but I also think that there's a survival aspect as well of just needing to set things a little bit higher, a little bit more expensive on this car thing, whatever it is, because the activation income that they rely upon, it's taken a big hit with the LMP1 hybrid class really getting reduced to what it is today. So, with all that said, Mr. Goodwin, we have no more minutes to go. Let's go ahead and say goodbye. I know. I think we're onto our fourth audio file on Skype due to a variety of failures and international connection issues, but that's just up for me to try and edit and make it as seamless as possible. I will just say this. Graham Goodwin, you are a treasure. Thank you for taking time, making time, and helping make this show one of the genuine highlights of the week for me, because we get to talk about things we love, facilitated by folks who love the sport and send in fun and interesting and thought-provoking bits for us. And then we get to put it up on the web and hear about all the things we got wrong and hear all the things we got right and try to take it a bit personal and then come back and do it again next week. So thank you for being awesome, my friend.
Good stuff. Thoroughly enjoy it every single week. It goes from strength to strength. And thanks again to all of you around the various parts of the web we dip into and ask for your contributions. You never, ever fail to let us know exactly what the points you'd like to discuss and the points you're passionate about are. And the standard of the questions continues to amaze me. Dozens and dozens and dozens coming forward. Even if I forget to do it and do it a little bit late, it's an extraordinary response and outweighs more or less anything else I've seen in this particular kind of area of the sport in terms of the numbers, the quality, the depth, the geographical spread. Keep doing it. We love it. Apologies we can't get to all of you. I think we've got to somewhere around 2/3 of them this time, and I hope we can maintain that moving forward. From me, in what's now the very early morning here in the UK, I'm just about to actually pack up my bag and go and sit next to a pool for a week, which is something I've not done for a while. Have a great week, and we will hear you again on A Week in Sports Cars.
Presented by Cooper Tires, and hopefully with Scott Tucker or whomever else next week if we can't get you by telecommunication.